Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls Podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, theories, and more.
I'm Lexi.
And I'm Nicole.
And today we are so excited to begin A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. This episode 1 covers the prologue through chapter 8 of ACOWAR. If you're new here, first of all, hi, welcome. Nice to see you.
And if you're not familiar with our ACOTAR series coverage, we do highly recommend that you take a quick listen to our intro episode where we explain in detail how spoilers work for these deep dives. We even have our spoiler explanation right up at the beginning of that episode to make it a fast listen. And we'll also add for new listeners that while you're not required to listen to our 8 episodes of ACOTAR and our 11 episodes of ACOMAF, I don't even know how many hours that is, but it's a good amount of hours. We politely nudge, just a little nudge, towards listening to them for full context for our continued deep dive conversation.
As always, let's start with our content warnings. While we're focusing today's discussion on this stretch of chapters and ACOWAR, we are going to bring in themes, foreshadowing, lore, and other insights across the entire ACOTAR series. These deep dives do not, however, include spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas's series, except at the end of every episode where we include our Maasverse Madness segment. We'll give a big spoiler warning so you can leave the episode if you haven't read the Maasverse, or you can keep listening for Throne of Glass and /or Crescent City callouts.
So with all of that said, if you don't know why Jurian, Alice, and Lucien are the only people with, eyes, or at least eye in Lucien's case, then please go finish the series. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we of Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
We are back in the spring court, and all bets are off on who I'm going to cuss out more. Is it Ianthe? Is it Tamlin? Is it maybe even possibly Feyre? The answer is absolutely 100% Tamlin. Also, please note that this episode does include commentary on domestic abuse. So please listen at your comfort level as we navigate these very difficult topics.
Additionally, we are so excited to see you at upcoming live events. We'll be featured guests at the Dragon Gauntlet in Boyne City, Michigan this August 16th and 17th.
You can also dance the night away with us at the Fantastique Collection's New Year's Eve drop party in Denver, Colorado. I'm so excited for that.
And we have so much in store as podcast partners at Romantasy BookCon in LA on February 20th through 22nd, 2025.
Links to all of these awesome events and information on tickets are in the show notes.
And lastly, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and have been loving this ACOTAR series journey we're on together, if you want more content, more community, more events, and more, please check out our Patreon.
We have 2 membership tiers that you can join. The Valkyries, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, community events, and a book club, promo codes for live events, plus 20% off discounted and exclusive merch store. That is all for $5 a month. Or you can join the High Fae, which includes everything from the Valkyrie level, plus access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges. That is all for $10 a month.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also in the show notes. And really and truly, thank you so much for supporting us as we've turned this podcast into our livelihood. It's all because of you.
And now it's time to do some major damage to the spring court.
Like we do for every episode 1 of a book we cover, we're going to kick off today's discussion with a simple question. Nicole, do you like this book?
Is this my favorite book in the ACOTAR series? No, but that in no way means I dislike this book. This book has multiple beautiful, intense battle scenes, which is SJM in her true element. It also shocked me to my core on multiple occasions. I mean, who saw Elaine pulling an Arya Stark? Not me, that's for sure. And it does have one of my favorite scenes of all time in the ACOTAR books, which is the High Lords meeting. I cannot wait to talk about that. The only reason that this book is not like a glowing 5 stars across the board for me is because after last book, we're primed to believe that Feyre is this big, powerful, intense High Fae, and she's really sidelined, in my opinion, a lot of this book. Does she give a reason for it? Yes, specifically in the battle scene, she doesn't feel trained to be a part of coordinated battle that would be required amongst the Illyrian Legion. And while I guess that's realistic. We're not really reading fantasy for a lot of realism, and it just doesn't really feel like the hero's journey Feyre to me. Feyre went under the mountain. She ran after the adder. She is someone who throws herself into the fray, and it just felt like a very out of character choice throughout the book. Now, this is with me having read it without doing a deep dive of it, so I might be feeling differently at the end of the book, but it just didn't feel like a truly Feyre choice. Also, I do feel like the romance does take a back seat. And for me, this is really a personal preference. I love romance in books. That is something that will always draw me towards my favorite books. And it does take a back seat, not a criticism really, because that's what was required of this story. But that's just another reason why it's not a glowing 5 stars. But I will say, there are certain things that I am feral to go over in this deep dive. Lore galore, especially around Amren, the Bone Carver, the Cauldron, all of that stuff. Elaine and Nesta as High Fae, their powers. Elaine as a seer. I can't believe I think one of the reasons I'm most excited for this book is truly for Elaine. More page time with Asriel and Cassian. Plus there's some delicious Maasverse Madness crossovers that I'm really excited to get to. So all in all, while I like this book, it is, I think, actually 4th on my ranking of the ACOWAR series. But I think the theme of politics and war really do come out, and it is what is necessary of this book. So I am very excited to talk about every morsel of it.
I'm right there with you on the excitement around the war and politics of ACOWAR. Overall, I love this book and appreciate how different it is from ACOMAF and the other books in the series. ACOMAF was the emotional healing journey that pulled at our heartstrings, and now we shift our full attention to war and our characters saving the world now that they've saved themselves. I know you were saying that one of the reasons that it's not as high on your list is because it doesn't have the romance. And for me, it's all about personal preference. I loved the romance in ACOMAF. Of course I did. And now I feel like if this one had any more romance than it already does, I would be a little bit like, okay, we already read this story. We already had that story, you know? And so now we can focus on kind of the bigger and higher stakes here for the whole world. And, you all know me. I love me some world building and politics, and that is why this book sings to me. It is tied for my second favorite of the series alongside Silver Flames. I love both of them equally, but for completely different reasons. ACOWAR does an excellent job of showcasing character depth, especially after last book's journey, and exploring side characters, along with twists and turns with the Hybern War, the political system among the courts, new lore, and especially that final battle. It's an action-packed book, but I never feel exhausted when I'm reading it, it has a really good flow and a balance to it. With that said, ACOWAR does include some plot choices that, from a storytelling perspective, I feel miss the mark a little bit. Similar to what Nicole said, I do have the same disappointment in how we don't see Feyre exhibit more of her powers in this book when life as we know it is on the line, and I do think that's a missed opportunity. I personally think it makes absolute sense, even in a fantasy world, that she's not with the Illyrians. She doesn't have to be on the battlefield with the Illyrians in order to showcase her power. She is a high lady. She, you see what all the high lords are doing, and it's kind of like, why, I understand why she's not in the mix because of the Cauldron and all of that kind of stuff. Again, I feel like there are some missed opportunities in her exhibiting her power on a bigger scale. And while I never want our beloved characters to die, the plot armor is a little too thick on almost every good guy. I say almost there. I'm so sorry, Suriel, you do die. For how high the stakes are in this book, I think there could have been more permanent consequences of this war felt by the courts and the inner circle. Yes, there is the aftermath of just the fatigue and the trauma from war, but I don't want to say that's it because I don't want to diminish that. But I think both Rhys and Amren coming back was a choice.
I know you wanted Amren to die, Lexi.
I don't want her. I love her. Anyway, we will definitely get to that part. I just think that there was some very thick plot armor on there. Despite that, I'm still giving this book 5 stars. How can I not with what we all go through in this book? I am so excited to deep dive ACOWAR as the world and what we know of it keeps expanding. And we analyze these high stakes and how each new layer of the story adds to the masterpiece that is this whole series.
Wow. Okay. 5 stars. All right. If I had to give this book a star rating, I would probably do you're going to hate me. I would do a 4.2. I'd do a 4.2. I don't want to give it a full 4 because that feels a little too low. 4.5 feels a little too high. So I'm going to do a 4.2, maybe a 4.25.
I also find it very interesting that you rate A Court of Thorns and Roses above this book.
I think my rating of the 5 books goes ACOMAF, ACOWAR, ACOSF or Silver Flames, ACOWAR, Frost and Starlight.
Yeah, we are very different.
That's okay.
Which is why this works out. Yes. All right, let's move on. As always, Nicole is going to start with this ACOWAR deep dive by summarizing what happens in the prologue to Chapter 8. So gather round, friends. We need an Inner Circle debrief.
Prologue, 500 years ago. It's destruction and carnage and Rhys. Oh my! After a long battle, our head bat boy is on the battlefield looking around and hoping he does not see his brother's bodies amongst the carnage. And after a false alarm of thinking he saw a dead Cassian, which worries me greatly, the short prologue ends with him continuing to look for his friends amid the gore. Part 1, Princess of Carrion. Chapter 1. Feyre is in the spring court, painting a beautiful landscape. Hey, did we go back in time? Nope. We learn that High Lady Feyre Archeron of the Night Court is in super spy mode. An oblivious Tamlin and a very suspicious Lucien enter and tell her it's time to talk to Ianthe, who is ready to make every excuse in the book as to why she helped turn Feyre's sisters and Lucien's mate into High Fae. Tamlin, this will shock everyone, is ready to put it in the past. But one actually truthful piece of information is dropped in this meeting. Tomorrow, Hybern's delegation arrives in the Spring Court, Chapter 2. After a quick mind-to-mind check-in with her mate, making sure her family is safe, ding dong, the assholes are here. And something's fishy with these Hybern royal twins. Cersei and Jaime Lannister, is that you? Oh, and they're also Daemati. But it's time to go to, yep, you guessed it, the dining room, of course. Feyre and Lucien agree to escort the twins and Jurian to the wall to show them where the holes are located, with only one attempted protest from Tamlin. But things start to get heated and not in a fun way. After some insults from I am the spy Jurian, the twins try to infiltrate Feyre's mind. Feyre, doing the most, saves the day by shielding Lucien and Tamlin's minds from the Lannister twins. The move costs her a headache, though. I'm sure that means nothing. Chapter 3. Time for a road trip to look for some holes in the walls with your greatest enemy. Out in the wilderness, Feyre and Lucien get an opportunity to chat about what went down after she left. After she was taken. But we can't keep going on a multi-day hole patrol because we've got a book to pace out. Coming back to the manor, they run into Drama Queen Ianthe, and Feyre learns that Tamlin, too overcome with sadness, did not participate in the hillside orgy of Calamai. So Lucien completed the rite with Ianthe. Completed indeed. Later, in the room with Alice, aka Lisa from marketing, who apparently has eyes and sees right through Feyre's act, she tells Feyre, go ahead and cast your revenge, but leave my family out of it. Feyre's like, I don't know what you're talking about, Lisa. Chapter 4. At the absolute ass crack of dawn, the spring court is ready for the summer solstice ceremony. No one is more ready than give me the spotlight, Ianthe. But the spotlight was moved ever so slightly to the right, shining that musical theater power ballad spotlight straight onto Feyre Darling instead, which causes the whole spring court to kneel to Feyre Cursebreaker. But don't worry, Colorful Mind Commentary Rhysand thinks that this stunt was hilarious. Time for the real party, though. Tamlin, it appears, turned in his fiddle this year to instead be an actual High Lord and dance with his supposed girlfriend. But it's not quite the same as last year. It's silence is what it is, actually. Chapter 5. Later that night, Feyre wakes from a feigned nightmare. So in a lacy nightgown, she heads over to Lucien's room and fake crying, she throws her hands around his neck, sobbing into his bare chest. Turning to gaze at her sister's mate eyes, Tamlin walks straight in and he's like, bro, what the heck, bro? Feyre leaves Lucien's room in favor of her own again and closing the door in Tamlin's face. Luckily, he decides not to kill Lucien, but don't worry, he thought about it, and Feyre goes to sleep, humming Taylor Swift's Mastermind. Chapter 6. Uh-oh, the keys to the Spring Court estate are missing, and no one's concerned about it, except for the Naga are here to kill us all. Ianthe. The most response she gets is a sigh from Tamlin. Our Hybern crew plus Feyre and Lucien head off on their multi-day camping trip, and guess who's sharing a tent? Feyre and I'm definitely not fucking my mate's sister, Lucien. These two continue their heart-to-heart talking about the Hybern bargain and what they were doing to try to get Feyre out of Rhys's bargain last year. Oh, and how Tamlin wrecked half the manor and killed the sentries on duty the day she left. The day she was taken. But the following day, they run into some unexpected hikers. It's the Children of the Blessed. Chapter 7. Feyre, again, doing the most, uses her Daemati powers to scare off the fanatics, and hey, it actually works. But they run off.
Good.
Thank you.
That was good.
Thank you. They run off much to the Lannister twins' dismay. Jurian, however, thanks her for intervening and drops some hints that he too has eyes. And wink, wink, hint, hint, he knows that she's playing spy for the Night Court. Takes one to know one, Jurian. But the next morning in their tent, Lucien wakes up Feyre with a hand over her mouth and the smell of blood in the air. Turns out the Lannister twins went through the wall and hunted down these 3 children of the Blessed, tortured them, and killed them. Yikes. Chapter 8. Uh-oh, Dad is mad. After the Hybern delegates tortured and committed murder, Feyre and Lucien sent the bogey after them, and Tamlin is mad at them. Reminding Feyre and Lucien that we do not eat our allies. Excuse me, wrong universe. Tamlin orders Lucien to get out of the study, and Feyre sees the perfect opportunity to rile up her Claw Watch ex-boyfriend, so much so that his anger lashes out and breaks the study again. But this time, Feyre intentionally does not shield and is cut up and bruised in the aftermath. Lucien comes in and is horrified at what Tamlin did to his supposed bride. Colorful Mind commentary, Rhys is ready to commit man-bear-pig slaughter. The next day, we learn that 7 Naga broke into the estate with those dang missing keys. Who saw that coming? The Cauldron sent me a vision. Ianthe sure did. But the guard who fell asleep on duty is due to be punished, even though everyone, including Tamlin, knows he was not at fault and a certain high drama queen high priestess is to blame. But Tamlin's pride and fear of looking weak wins in the end. And to the horror of the entire court, Tamlin punishes the innocent sentry, cementing a metaphorical crack in the spring court.
There are some things in life that are okay to not go so well, like trying a new type of milk in your coffee, or mixing it up with a new takeout spot, or infiltrating the spring court to slowly rip it apart from the inside. But finding the right doctor should live up to your expectations, which is where ZocDoc comes in, because you've got more options than you know.
ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skincare, and so much more. You can filter for doctors who take your insurance, who are located nearby, who are a good fit for your medical needs, and who are highly rated by verified patients.
You can also see their actual appointment openings, choose a time that works best for you, and click to instantly book an appointment. Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments.
If Lexi or I need to find a new doctor, ZocDoc is the first place we go to. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/FF to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/FF. ZocDoc.com/FF.
It's time to step into the cauldron and discuss key insights, character analysis, foreshadowing, theories, and oh, so much more. Before we head into the spring court, we have to examine this prologue. ACOWAR also had a prologue, which was Feyre's dream of the third task and in fact revolves around death too, setting the tone for the healing journey she was about to embark on in the last book. For ACOWAR, the prologue is in Rhys's POV, and to make it extra unique, it's a flashback to more than 500 years ago on the battlefield in the heart of the continent during the war. The prologue itself doesn't give us a whole lot of new information or offer Easter eggs, but it does set the tone for this book. This book will focus on war and the fight for humanity against Hybern, like 500 years ago against the Loyalists, which did include Hybern then too. And this prologue gives us a peek into what war is like against Hybern, with descriptions like they, quote, would not lose this war unless they had no other choice. Quote, we learned the hard way very early on that they had no regard for the ancient rules and rites of battle.
Which, can we pause for a second? In this universe, what do you think the ancient rules and rites of battle are? Because I want to know. That sounds fascinating.
I know, right? It illustrates the ugly side of war, death and carnage, despair, worry and fear for loved ones. Quote, mile after mile, a kingdom of the rotting dead. And still I looked.
And don't forget the dead animals and the high fae. They're piled on top of dead Illyrian warriors. And of course, Rhys notes the smell of the battlefield. Not to mention, it also includes Rhys mentioning his own powers have been depleted long before the battle was over. He depleted his magic first, and then he relied on all of his Illyrian training. A big part of this book is war strategy. I know that's shocking considering we haven't mentioned that yet, but also a big part of that war strategy is talking about magic depletion and how magic is often depleted for our core team by doing actions that deplete it quickly, like winnowing. So it was so smart of SJM to include this in the intro just to have as a little, I'm not going to even call it Easter egg, but as this is something to consider in battle to prime us for the rest of the book. We also learned that the Loyalist banner is a tusked boar embroidered on an emerald flag. And while I couldn't find any symbolism behind a tusked boar, I did find that wild boar symbolizes war in Viking culture.
Rhys, as well as his brothers Cassian and Azriel and others, are about to go through a terrible experience that is war again. A subtle reminder of how old they are, because not many other Fae were in the previous war. They're not facing this again because they want to or because there is glory in it, but because it is the right thing to do. Not knowing if they will survive it, not knowing when it will end, but they do know the enemy that they are about to face again. And they have the courage to go through this nightmare again because it's the right thing to do, and at their core, they are warriors and they are self-sacrificing, especially Rhys, as shown here in his POV.
I do want to point out that there are several mentions in this prologue that Rhys is going to find his dead brothers, but he notes that Azriel is most likely with his father because he's a spy master for the High Lord of the Night Court at the time. But he's worried that he's going to find a dead Cassian, even seeing someone who looks just like a dead Cassian on the battlefield. So I'm just going to slyly...
No, just stop it. Don't even say that before Elaine's ominous seer words. Like, we're not talking about Cassian dying here, okay?
This just might be possible.
Nope, we're moving forward here. Okay, next part. The bottom line is, this prologue sets us up for the story to come and the ugly side of war we're about to experience with these characters again.
And then before we get into even chapter 1, we have to talk about the title of part 1, which is The Princess of Carrion. The Princess of Carrion is a word that we have, or words that we have seen multiple times in the book so far. It is what the Book of Breathings called Feyre, amongst many other things, last book. But the way I took this is that Feyre is in the Spring Court. Spring is associated with life and growing things. Carrion means death and rotting, specifically death and rotting animals, which delicious. She is the plague of death, basically, that is making its way through the Spring Court, aka this place associated with life.
Later in the stretch of chapters, Ianthe will claim there's a blight causing the land to die. And while she attributes it to the Naga and it's all part of her master plan, Feyre herself is the blight in part 1 of the Spring Court. She is poisoning this territory from the inside. She is the blight, the Princess of Carrion.
Our Feyre POV, chapter 1, opens up with her painting this beautiful landscape of the Spring Court. And on the surface, it looks pure, beautiful, wholesome, all of these things. But she mentions that if she had painted it the way that she wanted to, quote, it would have been flesh-shredding thorns, flowers that choked off the sunlight, and any plant smaller than them, and the rolling hills stained red. Damn. Yeah, that sets the tone for our Feyre POV. Each brushstroke is noted as calculated. The painting can't look too happy, but instead it must look like she's trying to heal and grow anew. This painting is just Feyre on a canvas, basically.
Talk about setting the tone for the book. Chapter 1's opening line is, quote, the painting was a lie, aka Feyre is the lie.
Every move she's doing right now has to be careful and calculated. And while we have some notes on Feyre's careful and calculated moves that we'll give later, she does appear to be as if she's healing from the Night Court and capture, but she also can't appear like she's too happy to be home. Remember last book, she was not happy to be home after Under the Mountain. So she has to have that very careful balance, aka that very careful calculation. Also, not to mention that her sisters have been, taken away from her and are in the clutches of the dreaded Night Court. The symbolism here is just so stark on the page. I'm pretty sure it's actually even a tell don't show moment from the page. It is beautiful and wholesome on the outside, but corrupted and lifeless and full of bloodshed on the inside.
In this Feyre-centric trilogy, every book opens with her and Tamlin living a lie, wherever they're at in their relationship. In ACOWAR, he lied to her about the treaty and the curse. In ACOMAF, they were both lying to each other and themselves about being fine. And now in ACOWAR, Feyre has learned how to deceive from Rhys and is blatantly, vengefully lying to Tamlin.
immediately we are introduced to a very different type of narrative from Feyre. This narrative is bloodthirsty, chess player, and very cocky while doing it.
I'd like to point out from the get-go here that more than ever, Feyre is an unreliable narrator. We are in the Princess of Carrion's head, who is confident and self-righteous and only has hate, maybe a tiny bit of pity, for Tamlin. She may be cunning, but her emotions are tangled into her strategy and are leading the charge in this narrative. For instance, Feyre is simultaneously implying to the Spring Court of her horrific treatment at Rhys's hands, and then is absolutely disgusted that they believe, quote, Rhys would ever force someone, ... She is angry at Tamlin and co. for believing exactly what she insinuates, while she's also mad at Tamlin for not believing her in other instances. Feyre is a walking contradiction right here, and it's honestly a little jarring for many of us readers to see her like this. But we also understand where she's coming from because she is so caught up in her own revenge, understandably, that she is not quite as great of a chess player as she thinks she is. This conversation is going to be a running theme today. We admit this episode was a little bit difficult to navigate, as we both sympathize with Feyre's intentions, cheer her on in her revenge era, and also explore how and why she is taking it too far and her cockiness clouds her better judgment. What Feyre does out of spite and revenge will indeed have consequences throughout the rest of this book and the series. And at the same time, Tamlin absolutely brought this onto himself. Can you tell we have very mixed feelings about this stretch in the Spring Court? Buckle up, everyone. We're going on a roller coaster.
It's so real. We do get some really interesting literary glimpses into the death of the old Feyre. Quote, perhaps when my task here was done, I'd burn this manor to the ground too, starting with those roses. I love the mention of her starting with those roses, given that the first book was literally called A Court of Thorns and Roses. Soon we'll learn that Feyre's old room was absolutely shredded apart after she was gone for months by Tamlin. She notes how there are vines that are covered in thorns that have completely overrun her old room, making it unlivable. Quote, the bedroom was now a tomb. Feyre mentions at the end of ACOWAR that Tamlin's looking at her as if she is a ghost, and the room is now a symbolism of the girl who died under the mountain. Feyre is obviously not the same girl who was in ACOWAR and who lived in that room 1 year ago. This was not that long ago. She viewed herself then as being covered in thorns, and now the bedroom is literally covered in thorns, making it unlivable. I just love the literary symbolism there. That's just so good.
The contrasting situations continue because in part 1 of ACOWAR, Feyre tries to hide from the truth about her powers. She didn't know her own strength and had to pretend she didn't have any powers. She was conditioned to think that they were innately bad and she shouldn't have them. Again, remember that stolen language we got so much. But now she is using her magic to hide the true intent of who she is, even with something as simple as accidentally snapping a paintbrush. She is constantly using her powers for her sneaky mission, feeling confident in her ability after learning from the best in ACOWAR. Speaking of confidence, remember how much she agonized over her paintings not being good enough in ACOWAR? Well, now we're seeing a level of confidence in her paintings that we haven't felt from her before. But on the outside, she's holding back that confidence and playing the part of who Tamlin fell in love with, who he expects her to be, the girl back in ACOWAR, quote, who had shunned praise and compliments. Tamlin is playing right into her hand. Like Nicole said last episode, he believes in her performance so easily because he is desperately trying to hold on to this person who he doesn't realize died under the mountain. You know who isn't falling for her performance though? Lucien. He was suspicious. Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. He was suspicious of Feyre's performance back at the Highburn Castle, and she has clearly not convinced him otherwise in the weeks since. In fact, Feyre's new bedroom is across from his, and she assumes he's the one who ensured she now stay across from him, with his metal eye always turned toward her chambers. There's the whole question about what his metal eye can see too. He has stated that it can see through glamours, and he is obviously suspicious of Feyre. So does this mean he can see through the glamour on her right hand where her High Lady of the Night Court tattoo is? I don't think so. It's a big debate in the fandom about how in the world this is possible. And I don't think so because he will be very surprised when he sees her tattoo for the first time and learns that she is High Lady. We think he may be able to tell there is a glamour around her or see a I think maybe he can see like a little glitch in the glamour out of the corner of his eye every now and then, but he can't necessarily see exactly what the glamour is hiding.
I take it as he can see that a glamour is there. He can't see through a glamour. So like imagine on her hand, there's like a golden light surrounding it. That's the glamour. And that's what he can see, but no one else can see that. Does that make sense?
It does. And it raises a lot of questions and whatnot. But yes, absolutely.
Yes, it does. Cauldron boil me.
As a whole, Lucien has always seen what Tamlin is blind to. Her capability of holding her own even when she was human back in ACOTAR, her misery and desperation in ACOMAF, and now her power and cunning in ACOWAR. He had a fox mask for a reason. He knows how to play the courtly politics in a way that Tamlin doesn't, blindness specifically regarding Feyre aside. He knows that this doe-eyed innocent lady isn't truly Feyre at her core, because unlike Tamlin, Lucien knows that she was never this person and never wanted to be. He arguably has known Feyre better than Tamlin since the beginning of the series.
Tamlin knows the old Feyre on a deeper level, but Lucien knows the continuous personality traits of both Feyres.
But all he can do is watch her warily, make not so subtle comments about his mistrust, wait for a slip up, and try to have Feyre be his in with his mate Elaine. I'll get to this layered dynamic between Feyre and Lucien thanks to Elaine shortly, and we'll definitely explore it more next episode, because while he doesn't trust Feyre, he is desperately reliant on her to get to Elaine and share whatever information she has to help him find his mate. Plus, they band together in this stretch of chapters and are, in many ways, all each other has to trust as they rally against Hybern. But back to this opening scene, where Lucien's way of greeting Feyre is saying, quote, "I'm surprised you're so calm, given your promises to Hybern." Let us not forget the threats that Feyre exclaimed to Hybern, even at their departure when she was supposedly clear-headed, about lighting their pyres for what they did to her sisters. Feyre tries to explain this away by giving Ianthe the benefit of the doubt, but Lucien isn't buying Ianthe's excuses, and he is both telling Feyre not to either and challenging this facade that she's putting on. Because, again, he knows her better than this, and no version of Feyre that ever existed would say, "Oh, she was working to ensure Hybern's alliance held strong." That's when he calls her out with, "You're smarter than this."
I'm breathing a sigh of relief that it's finally time to start liking Lucien again. Like, homeboy took some L's last book. I'm so happy we like him again. Because yes, he is very suspicious of Feyre for obvious reasons. But the number one reason, at least in my mind, is like, he knows that she has some Slytherin in her. And arguably, this book brings out a lot more of that Slytherin. He knows that the woman who came back to the Spring Court in book 1, it took her forever to warm up or soften to Tamlin and Lucien. She was sharp-tongued. And what Ianthe did is 100% worse. And the fact that she's just like, "Oh, it's fine." He's like, "You bitch."
But Lucien's not the only suspicious one who knows Feyre all too well. While I am jumping ahead a little bit, we are on the topic of vocally suspicious people, so we need to bring up Spring Court onboarder and office gossiper extraordinaire Alice. I missed our girl so much, and now that she's back on the page, she is fiercer than ever. She was so worried about Feyre after Feyre returned from under the mountain, but she couldn't voice anything because, she's just a servant. And now she sees how healthy and strong Feyre is and is like, "Yeah, you can't fool me."
She literally snorts at one point. You can hear her going, "Sure, bitch."
I don't think she would call her a bitch. I think that it's very much of a
it's like an endearing bitch. Like how I'd be like, "Oh, hey, bitch, how's it going?" No, you wouldn't do that? Okay.
No, I don't think either of us have ever done that, but okay.
Alice continuously tries to catch Feyre in one of her lies, though, mentioning how she never used to care about being an outfit repeater before, or by holding up a piece of night court clothing, and it's the only piece that Tamlin didn't shred. She does say that he shredded 2 other sets, and this was the one he missed.
She and Lucien are the only ones who express suspicion because they were the only ones who noticed what was wrong with Feyre last book. Meanwhile, Tamlin saw what he wanted to see, like he's doing again now. Alice even extends an olive branch of trust, telling Feyre, who is dead set on continuing to pretend, that she is the one who told Moore to, quote, "please take care of her," when Moore came to save Feyre. Alice knew she needed saving, and she knew that the Night Court would protect and care for her, because Alice also informs us that, hey, servants talk, and Rhys never hurt innocents. Oh, and by the way, Alice's cousin saw Feyre in Adriata, and she seemed healthy and happy.
Shout out to that moment in Adriata in ACOWAR when Feyre mentioned how the servants of the Summer Court were rarely seen and heard. This is why.
Feyre and Rhys may be great performers when they put on their respective masks. Consequently, Feyre's mask is of innocence and naiveness, while Rhys's is cruel and dark. But there are certain things that even the best performers can't cover up. Feyre's physical well-being after she was supposedly tormented, when it looks more like she's been training. And then, of course, we have Rhys's good heart and need to protect those who can't defend themselves. Without skin in these political games, servants are able to see the real picture and draw their own conclusions that aren't clouded by the same blindness or judgment that those in higher positions have in regard to each other.
Alice says, quote, "They say you came back different, came back wrong." Which, pause, who's saying this? Because fuck you. That's rude. But Alice continues, quote, "I never bothered to tell them that I think you came back right at last." Get it, Alice. Oh, love it. Seeing Ianthe, though, is not the same as seeing Alice for the first time. We get that it has been weeks since Feyre has arrived at the Spring Court, and she is just now having a conversation with Ianthe. Pause for a moment, because this exchange sounds like Lucien and Tamlin have already talked to Ianthe multiple times since returning from Hybern. But this is Feyre's first time. So I guess that Feyre's whole, like, I want to be part of it this time, Tamlin. Like, don't shut me out. Let me in these conversations, only went so far.
She thinks in chapter 2 that Tamlin is true to his word, quote, when he explained that Jurian would arrive with the 2 commanders from Hybern and Feyre would be present for it. But like you said, it's been weeks. He promised her she could be in the planning and in every meeting. So has there not been any planning or meetings until Hybern arrives? Like, I highly doubt that. And it's interesting because the way that Tamlin and Lucien approached Feyre about talking to Ianthe, I'm under the impression that it seems like they've only recently gotten an explanation from her for doing what she did, even though that was the first thing Tamlin planned on doing when they got back from Hybern at the end of last book. So yeah, no matter what, the timeline that Stern talking to with Ianthe and letting her explain herself, it does not quite match up with what we're hearing here.
Moving on, Feyre looks at Ianthe's silver circlet with a blue stone on it, and she wonders, that looks mighty similar to Illyrian warrior siphons. I cannot stand Ianthe, but I do want to learn more about the High Priestess power and if this blue stone has some... Lexi's...
I know about the blue stone.
Get it, girl.
So we learned from Gwen in Silver Flames that these invoking stones are indeed similar to the Illyrian siphons. You're right there. Quote, except that the power of the mother flows through it. They cannot use it for harm, only healing and protection. So I got a crack theory here. What if Ianthe's invoking stone doesn't seem to exhibit magic like Gwen's does because the mother knows Ianthe is toxic and wants to use her magic to harm? So therefore the mother essentially cuts off the magic because she is the one who flows all of it through. I have no idea how Ianthe became a high priestess in the first place, and I'm just going to stop there because that would just make me spiral with more questions.
I'm so here for this crack theory and I love it. I do know she puts to sleep the guard on duty later this chapter stretch, but we don't know if that flows through the
right. And then like we know that she can also do create Fae lights. So yeah. I feel like there is a difference between, I'll say, like the smaller magic that high Fae can all do, which would include both of those things, and then the invoking stones magic, which we do see on display from Gwen because the invoking stone protects her and Nesta.
I'm so excited to get to Gwen. I love her. Anyway, let's get into this half-assed apology. Ianthe says, quote, I wish to begin by saying how truly sorry I am. I acted out of a desire to grant what I believed you perhaps yearned for but didn't dare voice, while also keeping our allies in Hybern satisfied with our allegiance. I'm gonna get on a small high horse because are we forgetting that she bought into this alliance with Hybern, and he said this last book because she was promised that he would get rid of the Prythian High Lords and instead put the High Priestesses in charge. Like, Tamlin, Remember, she's literally saying, you can step down, good sir, or die, because probably they'd have to kill the High Lords so that they don't rebel. Like, even Lucien y'all, like, come on, remember this diabolical plan. Are you serious? It does not take a genius to figure out that Ianthe is lying through her teeth, though. But Feyre, needing to stay true to her deception, gives Ianthe a half-assed threat. The coldness behind that threat, it does not take much acting, though, because all of what I just yelled at into a microphone aside, Ianthe sold out her sisters to Hybern and thus turning them high fae. And Ianthe is sitting here like, you're welcome.
While Ianthe is definitely lying and using this as an excuse, that it was a gift for her sisters, I'm going to bring up what I mentioned about the King of Hybern last episode. Ianthe also believes that humans innately want to become Fae so that they can be immortal too. And she, along with the King of Hybern, don't shake your head, I would want to become Fae.
Against your will? Being thrown into a cauldron?
No, I'm not saying any of that.
Context matters. I would also want to be high fae, but I don't know if I would want to have to be thrown into a cauldron, traumatized beyond belief in order to make that happen.
So my point here is that they really do consider this a gift to Nesta and Elaine, and it's a gift to Feyre so she doesn't have to experience the dread she certainly did feel when realizing her sisters would grow old while she kept her youth. Yes, this action was absolutely for Ianthe's own benefit to win further favor with the king, but there is some truth to her words, because at her core, she assumes the sisters would want to become immortal and young like Feyre, no matter the traumatic experience of going into the cauldron. Like, I'm sure that she thinks this, and again, the mortal queens thought this as well. It's a small cost to be like the Fae.
What is truly delicious about this scene is seeing how outright hostile Lucien is to Ianthe. We will learn later that when Tamlin was too heartbroken over Feyre's capture, he sat out of Calamai celebration, where, he kills a white stag and then takes a woman into a cave and kicks off a hillside orgy. And so Lucien went in his stead, which, quick side note, Feyre realizes that the right would have been when her and Rhys were in the cabin and Rhys was buried deep in her, and that they generated their own magic that night. What magic would they need to have generated? Because given that Calamai is there to make sure that there's an eternal spring throughout the entire lands for a whole year, the Night Court has seasons and solar calendars, so I'm confused by this magic.
I definitely read it as Feyre being kind of naive and caught up in love, where it's like, maybe we generated our own magic versus a world building hint of magic in the court.
Got it.
I'm more confused how Lucien, not being from the Spring Court, was able to sub in for Tamlin and create the magic necessary and specific to the Spring Court to keep it spring, among other things. So Calamai, I guess it is a little bit more general magic versus court-specific magic. We're just gonna
brush over that one. But Ianthe did want to be the woman that Lucien took into the cave. Lucien says that it was his choice to step in for Tamlin and do this, but it is mind-blowingly obvious that he did not enjoy this. After an encounter with Ianthe later on this chapter stretch, Lucien's body is taut and near trembling in her presence, which just breaks my freaking heart for him, and that Tamlin allowed this to happen. Yes, Lucien gave his, he gave his consent, but it really does hurt my heart to see Lucien like this. Here in the scene, when Lucien is standing up to Ianthe, he's telling her that if she expects their gratitude for what happened to Feyre's sisters and his now mate, she will be waiting a long time. And what does his oldest friend and High Lord and, greatest confidant do in response? He gives him a warning look and a growl. He is siding with Ianthe, who, again, wants all the High Lords dead and to take over the Prythian continent. He is siding with her more so than his number one right-hand man. That is despicable. Now, Tamlin's protection of Ianthe is beyond just loyalty to her and her family. Remember, her father works in the Spring Court. His protection or defense of her is also connected to Hybern, a person who can eviscerate them with half a thought. Any information or ill will that she sends to Hybern that she's receiving from them in the Spring Court, it could easily be their downfall. Easily. Not to mention that they've already entered into a magical bargain with Hybern, which we know could kill Tamlin or at least take away his magic. It could kill someone he's attached to. Plus, we can't forget that it is Tamlin, Tamlin does not like conflict, as we well know with how he dealt with Amarantha. And by dealt, I mean how he sent Lucien to try for peace with Amarantha, as we learned in one of our history lessons back in ACOWAR.
Feyre makes a good point that he is showing the same blindness towards Ianthe as he is toward her. He doesn't look closely at how dangerous either of these seemingly innocent women are beneath the fine clothes and polite speech.
I do want to point out a small crack theory that I have. Maybe one of the reasons that Tamlin is, brushing under the rug that, again, Ianthe wants to end all the High Lords and be, one of the High Priestesses, Queens of Prythian. Maybe Tamlin wants to not be High Lord. Maybe he is looking for an opportunity. I'm going to call it like quiet quitting. Maybe he's looking for an opportunity to quiet quit and not have to be a person of this responsibility anymore. That's my new headcanon. That makes me understand Tamlin a little more. All of this to say, Tamlin tells Lucien that they need to present a solidified front right now. Raise your hand if you've heard this excuse to be passive before.
I love this line, which summarizes Tamlin just so perfectly. Quote, that was his new favorite word, try. Tamlin really is trying. He's trying to nurture the doe-eyed girl he saved from poverty. He's trying to play nice with Hybern while trying to convince his people why they should do the same. He's trying to right his own wrongs. And as much shit as we give Tamlin in, most episodes, it really is something to pity because he is a man of trying, not making it happen.
Feyre and Lucien really bring up great points in this conversation, though. What about the people of the Spring Court? Yeah, remember those people who were brutalized by Amarantha and put in camps for 50 years?
Well, hold on, because that was one of our big debates during the ACOWAR deep dive. Were the Spring Court citizens under the mountain all that time, or were they here until the cursed deadline? And then they went under the mountain, so they were there for about 3 to 4 months. I think we ultimately decided that they were still in the Spring Court, but they were still terrorized by Amarantha, who had their villages burned and who sent monsters into the court to mess with Tamlin and his people.
Okay, so they were put in camps for 3 months. Still 3 months longer than anyone's court should be in camps.
And there was, of course, masks on their faces. They were absolutely still terrorized by Amarantha,
who hails from
to the
Hybern.
same extreme that others were, though.
Yes. So they asked the question, they meaning Feyre and Lucien, how are the people of the Spring Court going to feel about living beside Hybern? I love that Lucien and Feyre, who are not from the Spring Court, are thinking about Tamlin's territory more than he does.
Why are you making me having to defend Tamlin right now? Because
I don't know.
I would argue
rip Tamlin a new asshole.
Okay, so hold on, because I'm arguing that they're bringing up a point that Tamlin has already ensured happens. They're asking, okay, well, what about the people of the Spring Court? And he's like, well, I'm already working on that. And Tamlin is putting some precautions already in place by evacuating people to other parts.
He is instructing people to move east to the eastern side of the territory. Remember, Hybern is to the west. But is he helping them? Is he providing resources, aid, housing, anything? We don't know. I'm going to guess no, because I feel like Tamlin would have said something about it. Like, that's picking up a home, a business, that's picking up your family. Like, who knows where people are at financially? We saw during the tithe last year that they're giving away their finances and some people can't do that. Is Tamlin doing anything to help them move east?
We have no idea.
We don't. I'm going with no because I hate Tamlin so much in this episode. He's actually pissing me off so much.
If you were on a mini high horse, I'm going to get on my own mini high horse here. And no one will be surprised that I am bringing this up again. Because remember back in ACOWAR when Tamlin sent Feyre away 3 days before the deadline and cared more for her safety than all of the Spring Court's freedom? And Feyre was so in love with him that the fact that he put her safety in front of his entire court just washed over her. She didn't even really think about that. Does she not realize that this is a somewhat similar situation? She thinks so little of him because he is selling out Prythian for her, selling out everything decent and good in himself for her. This is not the first time this year even that he has done something like this for Feyre. But now she's on my side. She's on on the mini horse here with me. And it's like, what the fuck? Largely because she has Rhys now to compare to Tamlin. And Rhys would never do something like this just for her. Well, he may have risked Valaris, but it was for the greater good of Prythian, not just to save Feyre. Although now that I say that, I feel like he would do anything to save her, which if that is hypothetically the case, it goes back to how she is an unreliable narrator because she understandably has such double standards for Rhys and Tamlin.
I don't know if Rhys is the burn the world for Feyre kind of a person. I think he's in the I would be a calculated chess player for Feyre kind of a person.
Yes.
Yeah, you bring up really good points. And all I have to say is love is blind. Love is blind. And she was definitely blind that first time in ACOWAR when she had the rose-colored glasses on for sure. However, it is hot outside in the spring court and Feyre is missing her temperature regulating soft sheets back in Velaris. If you wake up too hot or too cold, we highly recommend checking out Miracle Made bed sheets. We're assuming Velaris approved. Miracle Made sheets are inspired by NASA and use silver-infused fabrics that are temperature regulating so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long.
These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. And Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and they feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels.
Go to trymiracle.com/FF to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, you can order today and save over 40% off. Plus, if you use our promo code FF at checkout, you will get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%.
Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/FF and use the code FF to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40%. Again, that's trymiracle.com/FF to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode.
Before the arrival of the Highburn peeps, we get a short scene of some mind-to-mind speak with Rhys. Feyre confirms that she is safe and wants to know about her family members' conditions. Rhys says, quote, "I love you. They are alive. They are healing." I love that Rhys says, "I love you" first to her. She didn't say it to him, but that's not a dig at Feyre. I just love that is the first thing he says to her. She notes how she didn't remember the bond being so hard to hear through. Is this because of distance, or is this because of the breaking of the bargain, so it's still like healing?
That's my understanding, because remember, the Fae-bane is not in her system yet. Their bond was beneath the wasteland that was the bargain bond. So while it's there and of course fully intact, it's like it is still healing over these scabs to come back to the surface. And I do think that it is this reason instead of the distance, because Rhys said it was like she shouted down the bond at him when there was still that same distance back in last book.
One of the things that I wondered about on my first read of this book is why don't they use their mind-to-mind speak more often to communicate? Feyre explains it here that apparently I just skipped over on all my previous reads, that the possibility of their mating scent, which everyone in the Spring Court is expecting to fade in the next few months, it might be kept strong if they continue to use their mind-to-mind speak. Which that totally makes sense. But the mating bond communication is just a Feyre and Rhys thing. Like, for instance, Cassian and Nesta do not have this ability. So I'm guessing this is like an unreliable narrator moment again, because this seems like Feyre guessing rather than this being a fact of the mating bond.
Yes, I do think that she is guessing because she doesn't know any better and she has to play it as safe as possible. But also, Rhys doesn't speak to her very often either. So she may be following his lead, making
That's
it be
true.
a good guess of hers. Yeah. Being Damati is so tangled up in their mating bond that I'm not surprised if this is the case for them. Using their Damati magic with each other is using the bond, especially at that distance.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Before moving on to the introductory scene with Highburn, I need to pull this heartbreaking part. That's when Feyre locks the door to her new chambers and safeguards herself so she can have a good cry. It's definitely not the first time she has been in such a position in a Spring Court bathroom, but now it's for completely different reasons. As cocky, cunning, and powerful as she makes herself out to be in the stretch of chapters, she still has that vulnerability. But she's all alone again, having to go through this on her own, even though now she has love and family and comfort out there in the world who she is doing this for. Also, I love that little nod to locking the door. As a human, she knew locking the door would not keep the high fae out. And now she locks it because she knows it will give her that extra second to properly defend herself. All right, so we know that it's one thing that Tamlin made the bargain with the King of Hybern. But wow, it is a whole other reality to have Hybern's niece and nephew here as guests, as allies. And Tamlin rolls out the red carpet for them, trying to keep the peace between everyone and do his part as Hybern's ally. Of course, we will learn later in this book that he is acting, I'll say as a double agent or opportunistic agent, I suppose is a better word. And we know here that he is trying to protect his people by evacuating them to safer areas. But unless I'm mistaken, we really don't get any hints that Tamlin is a opportunistic agent here. We could chalk it up to him being a really good actor, or he really is caught in the middle here and doesn't know how to properly play the game. He's letting Hybern into his home and trusts them enough to not ensure his closest people have mental shields. I'm going to go off of that in a second here. That the food is safe to eat. He even lets Feyre out into the woods with these dangerous commanders for days. Yes, with Lucien and guards, but still. He's people-pleasing to Hybern and seems all in. He may not like them, but he's fully bought into his end of the bargain, and by default, he trusts them as he tries to be a good ally. What would happen if he told Feyre that this was all part of him being a, for lack of a better word, double agent, and that there is more to his plan? Would that have changed anything with her own plan to destabilize the Spring Court?
I was going to say, for a logical Feyre, I do think it would have. She's so emotionally driven right now, though, that I don't think it would have changed anything.
I think so too. I think that she is so blinded by her own rage and hatred for Tamlin. Plus, his actions are speaking louder than words. He could tell her this. Yeah, right. But just letting them into his home, helping them with the wall on his border, and being so complacent, he is giving them the upper hand. He is giving them that default trust, even if he says and kind of logically knows he can't trust them. Does he have any other choice without causing bad consequences for his bargain with Hybern? I don't know. That's the thing. It's not so much what Tamlin is doing in his alliance with Hybern, it's how he is going about it when he lets them into the Spring Court, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Again, it's that like lack of playing the game and that cunning that you really need to play with the big boys like Hybern. So, Feyre at least takes upon herself to spy on Hybern. Her first task is to learn where they plan to strike and how long the Cauldron needs before returning to full capacity, then to smuggle that information to Rhys and the others. And she has to do all of this before too much time passes and it's obvious her mating bond scent hasn't faded, giving away that she is still in fact mated to Rhys. She's on a timer she didn't realize she was on when she first came up with this brilliant plan back at Hybern's castle. And she has no way of knowing what this timeline looks like, so she has to play it safe.
So in walks Jurian, the 500-year-old sort of human emissary to Hybern, and two commanders, one male and one female. Welcome to the chat, Lannister twins, aka the King of Hybern's niece and nephew, Princess Branna and Prince Dagden. Both of these two are high fae in appearance, which I'm curious why that in appearance was necessary, because like, are they not high fae? Are they something else?
I think because they just are so different looking high fae that Feyre also doesn't think of them, I don't want to say on equal standing as like them, because it's not about like equality here, but like as the same species almost.
Yeah. Both have ruddy skin and inky black hair and are void of all emotion. But there's something else that is off between these two. They ask for only one room. Okay, you know, we've shared a room before, you and I guess that's not weird. Oh, wait, they're lovers. Cute.
Well, so and that is an assumption that we have, because
I will say I did check multiple different sources, and they, on like character profiles of Branna and Dagden, it says that they're like their partner is each other. So I do think that they are like confirmed lovers.
I first of all, I wholeheartedly agree that they are lovers. It is never outright stated on the page, but so for instance, if they are pulling a Lannister here, they would not be only physical with each other.
to Cersei Lannister, who definitely fucks other people. But
yeah, absolutely, because they basically will call dibs on the children of the Blessed, which is rough there. And Branna had sexual partners from Autumn Court during the war, which, considering they were on opposite sides, I don't think it was consensual. So I guess they could be, just super close twins. But absolutely, I am getting full other vibes here. They are Lannister twins.
I think there's a line that Feyre says. She's like, in whatever ungodly capacity that they appreciate each other's companionship. I think that right there is all the wink, wink, hint, hint we need from SJM that, okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
I do love the moment when Feyre thinks, quote, I could practically feel the snide remarks simmering within Lucien. What I would give to know what Lucien was going to say to these twins. Just love it. But Dagden, he yields completely to Branna, which, not gonna lie, that is more than I wanted to think about when it comes to their sex life. Quote, he poured her drinks, sniffing them at first. He selected the finest cuts of meat from the platter and had neatly arranged them on her plate. He always let her answer and never so much as looked at her with doubt in his eyes. And of course, we will soon learn that they are both Daemati. Notably, however, Ianthe is not here at their rolling out the red carpet, and instead, she has a much more dramatic and grand entrance planned.
They must have. She already has the Fae-bane, so she must be in the kitchen, like putting the food up.
She was the one who put the Fae-bane in the food?
Yes, she's the one who put the Fae-bane in the food.
I thought I couldn't hate Ianthe more. And yep, there it is. I hate her more. Wow.
I have to give Feyre credit, which I realize we haven't done a whole lot yet this episode. I'm sorry. She's doing a dangerous balancing act. She is both trying to be threatening to her Hybern enemies to show them who's boss, and civil and polite because they're allies, all the while convincing Tamlin and co. of her role as a sweet and innocent lady of the Spring Court. That's a lot of balls to be juggling in the air at the same time. And for the most part, she's successful at this, at least in this episode and stretch of chapters. We have talked before about Feyre's clothing choices, or lack thereof of choice, and how she has been learning about how one's outfits can influence their representation. Feyre is leaning heavily into that here in the Spring Court. Once, these beautiful, feminine, colorful dresses made her feel unclean because of how untruthful they were. Now, she is a wolf dressed in sheep's clothes. She leverages how clothing can create perceptions, and it's a vital part to her Spring Court mask. It's no different here at the Hybern greeting. She purposefully dresses like, quote, a harmless, lovely package, perfect for a High Lord to mount whenever he wished. Does that sound like the beginning of ACOWAR, anyone? And it seems like the Hybern royals accept this first impression, though they will very soon learn how sharp Feyre's talents are. Or should I say mental talents? Well, let's get into this disturbing realization that these Hybern twins are Daemati. Love that Feyre knows how to spot a fellow Daemati. She has learned so much after training with Rhys and simply being among another Daemati, plus, being one herself. Jurian is distracting Feyre, Lucien, and Tamlin by egging her on about Rhys and how she was fucking him before she left Tamlin, which, again, wow.
But don't worry, they're allies. He's a spy.
I mean, this is very good distraction works. Well, at least until Feyre recognizes what's happening. She realizes that Hybern's plan is to strike while they're distracted. But for some crazy reason, Lucien and Tamlin's shields aren't up. Okay, we got to talk about this. Why? They are both high fae. They are political figures. Their shields should always be up. Like, for instance, Tarquin and co.'s shields are up, so we already know that this is not just a Night Court thing. And Tarquin is super young and spent most of his High Lord time under the mountain without most of his powers, so if he can do it, there's no excuse.
There is no way. Tamlin, a powerful High Lord. Yes, he did not want to be High Lord. He was not primed to be High Lord. He was the son of an incredibly powerful High Lord. And Lucien, who is the son of a very paranoid High Lord. It is impossible that these two did not learn shielding. So do they just not know the signs of what it feels like to be like penetrated in your mind? Like, do they not know since they're not Daemati? Like, we're only in Feyre's POV, so we don't know if other people don't feel that like same like you're in my mind. Regardless, they should have them up. Hybern,
it's irrelevant if they know who's a Daemati or not. Like, they should just always have it up.
They also don't trust Hybern. Like, why would they not have them up in the presence of a company that they don't trust?
I agree that he should absolutely have his shields up there. And Tamlin ends up being a spy. So Tamlin, of all people, should have his shields up so Hybern doesn't realize what he's trying to do, like what the opportunities he's looking for. The only reason I can think of is complacency. They have lived in their spring court bubble for so long that they forget to shield when they need to. No wonder the spring court implodes. Shielding is the most basic concept, and their High Lord, during times of war and letting the enemy into their territory, is not shielding. I can't. I am more angry at Tamlin and Lucien for this than other things.
Draga. I don't have words that aren't me just stringing cuss words into a microphone, so move on.
So do we think that it's a coincidence that 2 Daimati are sent to the spring court for this mission? No! Hell no. The twins are here to inspect the wall's holes so that the cauldron can eventually shatter the wall. Yes, that is like their main mission here. But they are also here to glean information, potentially warp Tamlin and Co's minds.
And get information from someone who was just living in the Night Court for months, aka their number one enemy.
And, of course, to nullify their powers with Faebane. I mean, this feels like quite the technicality with the bargain. Tamlin claims the bargain includes Spring Court citizens remaining untouched and undisturbed. And, Hybern has to abide by those laws there. But was such a promise also extended to Tamlin and Lucien, the leaders of the Spring Court? Because I'm assuming that there's that loophole there. Yeah. I don't know. The fact that Tamlin trusted Hybern to play by the rules, I just can't.
Who else did he expect to play by the rules? Ianthe. Because after she took Lucien's eye and she was like, I'm so sorry. Let's throw a party to show you that I mean peace. And he goes to the party and she cursed him.
He is so naive. No matter how much I try to look from Tamlin's perspective about having no other option, there is a difference between allying with Hybern and trusting them.
Yes.
And he might say, again, that he doesn't trust them, but he isn't doing the most basic of basic things to protect anyone against them because he is relying on Hybern to be cut and dry with their bargain. But Hybern is just far more creative and cunning than Tamlin, so Tamlin can't even comprehend what they are capable of doing. Thankfully, though, Feyre is here to shield Tamlin and Lucien against the Hybern twins. I love how she lunges for their minds after blocking them from going into the others' minds as her own way of saying, don't fuck with me. And she also does show her hand as a fellow Daimati with an agenda. She rightfully can't trust Tamlin to protect his manor residents from the Hybern twins. So she has to stay up most of the night ensuring that Brianna and Dagden don't infiltrate others' minds.
During their first trip to the wall, we really start to see the beginning of Feyre using Lucien as part of her plan to tear apart the Spring Court. While Tamlin is not even here, she is noticeably standing closer to Lucien, closer than one would deem appropriate, which I will roast Feyre about in a moment, about how she treats Lucien during this section. But I love that Lucien does not step away from her. He's not like, oh, why are you so close to me? He instead steps in front of her when he sees how Brianna is looking at her. Lucien is doing his absolute best during this stretch and for the rest of this book to make up the fact that he did not step in last time. And he is saying, I have erred. Let me make up for that right now. But in accordance to Feyre's plans, the closeness to Lucien does start to get into the Hybern royals' heads about her and Lucien being something more, which then makes Tamlin look bad and makes him feel like everyone knows something that he doesn't, which Tamlin hates, looking lesser or weaker in other people's eyes. I will give Feyre this. She is very good at playing on Tamlin's insecurities, which we'll talk more about later. Feyre and Lucien do get a moment where just the two of them are able to have I'll call it a heart-to-heart of sorts on this trip. We get to hear Lucien's side of the story about what happened when Feyre was first in the Night Court's clutches. The day she went away, noticeably avoiding the word left, he, meaning Lucien, beat Tamlin back to the manor after racing back hearing that she was taken. The only trace of her was the melted engagement ring, and he immediately got rid of it so that Tamlin would not see it upon his arrival. This is a spot on her finger where Tamlin will noticeably look at multiple times during the stretch of chapters. Feyre will later note about how she almost pities Tamlin because people keep lying to him and keeping things from him, or at least shielding the truth from him. I'll say that. And it's all to spare his feelings. And yeah, I'll throw in, like, in Tamlin's defense, yeah, people are keeping things from him. So there is that naivete because of that reason that people aren't telling him things. Lucien didn't tell him about the ring. Alice didn't tell him that she was saved, not taken, etc. However, my sympathies with Tamlin only will go so far, because the reason people aren't telling him things is because people are afraid of his wrath and his anger problems. So yeah, they keep things from him because or else the Spring Court Manor gets fucking destroyed. In reality, it is on Tamlin to get his anger under control and open his own eyes on the ongoings of his own court. Anyway, Lucien admits that in Hybern, things did not turn out the way that they wanted. That's the understatement of a century. He doesn't say it here necessarily, but you really do get the feeling of Lucien having guilt and anger that the situation is what they're in.
Quote, it was a trap, not just for the Inner Circle, but for Tamlin and Lucien too, where Hybern showed them just how much of an upper hand he has on his new allies. And I think Lucien really realizes how much they fucked up by allying with him.
Feyre asks him, quote, why does Hybern want to do this beyond some horrible desire to conquest? What drives him? His people? Hatred? Arrogance? Lucien responds with, quote, do you? And then he's cut off by the Hybern peeps walking in. I can't even, like, I'm normally pretty good at guessing what people were going to say as they're interrupted. I have no idea. I am stumped.
I am as well.
Okay.
I also appreciate that Feyre's question will be answered by, I think it's Amren later in this book. Let's keep talking about this interesting dynamic between Feyre and Lucien. From one standpoint, he is suspicious of her and she has to be extra careful around him, like we were saying at the top of the section. But at the same time, they've got, I don't know if truce is the right word, but they are in this together. For one, they unite under their mutual hatred of Hybern and Ianthe. But with Lucien now her sister's mate, he may not know Elaine, but Feyre understands how deep and primal that bond goes. I don't want to say respects it with Lucien, but she can understand, she can sympathize with him and his mate now being gone. This also kind of makes them like in-laws now, meaning they are connected now in a way that no one else in the Spring Court can possibly comprehend. Yes, there are a lot of nuances associated with this mating bond between Lucien and Elaine, but at a basic level, Feyre and him are connected differently now. And the only comparison I can think of is being part of a family together who both deeply care for one person.
Yes. We also get these moments of friendship that are really shining on the pages with Feyre and Lucien. When they return from this short trip to the wall, Feyre is stiff on her horse and she gives Lucien kind of like a please look. And Lucien, like, you know, kind of comes over and lifts her off and he jokingly bows back to her. I just love these little moments with these two. Yes, I know what hurts my heart is that Feyre is doing them to manipulate and, you know, put a wedge between Tamlin and Lucien. But these little moments show how much Lucien's joking mode, it is back after being gone for an entire book. And let me tell you, God, I missed it. I missed it so much.
And it seems that Feyre did too, because we get lines like, quote, it was hard sometimes to remember to hate him, to remember the game I was already playing. We may be in the Spring Court, but summer is here in the mortal realm and we're ready to look and feel confident inside and out. While confidence is not hard for Feyre in this stretch, I've had my fair share of insecure moments, especially when it comes to my skin and acne that never quite went away since high school.
For me, one of the biggest things that can lead to a lack of self-confidence is my skin. Acne breakouts, wrinkles, all of these things that can really take a hit on our confidence levels. And that is why we are so excited to partner with Apostrophe, the sponsor of today's episode. Apostrophe's goal is to help you feel confident in your own skin, whether you're dealing with breakouts, signs of aging, acne, scarring. Apostrophe is there to help you love the skin you're in.
Simply fill out an online consultation about your skin goals and medical history. Then snap a few selfies and a dermatology provider will create a customized treatment plan just for you. Apostrophe offers access to prescription treatments for all types of acne, from hormonal acne to facial acne and even back, chest, and butt acne. Treat breakouts from head to toe.
I've been using Apostrophe for about 6 months now, and I've loved my experience with them. Specifically, that it is so incredibly simple. I love it. You fill out the online consultation. I was done with it in about 15 minutes, which is way shorter than an in-person appointment and also a trip to the pharmacy. Plus, I get access to expert derm team care.
We have a special deal for our audience. Get your first visit for only $5 at apostrophe.com/FF when you use our code FF. That's a savings of $15. This code is only available to our listeners. And to get started, just go to apostrophe.com/FF and click Get Started. Then use our code FF at sign up and you'll get your first visit for only $5. Thank you, Apostrophe, for sponsoring this episode. As we move into the summer solstice, I want to take a moment and discuss an important part of Feyre's infiltration plan. She is leveraging her role as Feyre Cursebreaker, which she cringed at last book, but now embraces because with the people's love and admiration for her, she can turn them against Tamlin. How does she know she can turn them against Tamlin? Well, by knowing exactly how Tamlin can be based on past experiences with him. So she leans fully into this role as the lady's people, giving them the hope and kindness they needed from her after coming back from under the mountain. We may be questioning the extent to which Feyre takes her revenge, but I really want to stress how proud I am of her for simply being in the Spring Court again after what all she endured here before. Last time she was here, she was a prisoner and a shell of who she was. And it took a lot for her to heal from this trauma and come into her own. Now she is able to weaponize what had previously crushed her, the people's expectations of her and her titles, the dresses that distinguish her as the Lady of the Spring Court, her relationship with Lucien, how he failed her and she felt betrayed by him last book, Tamlin's anger, Ianthe's influence in this territory and the loyalty between her and Tamlin, on the list goes. Feyre may be living alongside these memories with the ghost of her former self, but she has grown so much and come so far where she doesn't let them trigger her, but rather she uses these in this revenge era, which is the big reason why I cheer her on in this revenge era. With summer solstice, it feels like we've come full circle with Feyre because it was exactly 1 year ago that she and Tamlin shared their lovey-dovey night, dancing with the will-o'-the-wisps. Feyre jamming out to Tamlin going hard at the fiddle, kissing, and Feyre thinking how it's the happiest she'd ever felt.
It was also the first time that Feyre felt safe and cared for back in ACOWAR. But now she's gone so far beyond safety and comfort. She's found her family, unconditional love, strength, and hope for her future.
Can we also marvel at how this was only a year ago?
Dude.
Everything has changed. And yet the point of this summer solstice is to make it seem like the only thing that has truly changed is her leaning into and embracing who she is meant to be at the Spring Court. I think it's also telling that Tamlin doesn't play the fiddle this year. He's preoccupied, putting on a facade for Hybern, and he's unable to be his whole self. Like, can you imagine Dagden and Branna's reactions if he, whipped out the fiddle and started playing his, Get Low?
I feel like they would have requested the Lannister theme song. Like, can you imagine if the Reigns of Castamere started? This would have been a very different type of summer solstice.
I would run faster out of there than if the boogie was chasing me. we all know that song is bad. I'm getting ahead of myself though. Let's pull some highlights from the summer solstice. Feyre is dressed in a creamy white dress that is pure and clean, playing right into that role she wants to showcase to the people of the Spring Court. Love that Alice picked it out for her because she knows what Feyre is up to and essentially is enabling her as long as Feyre spares her boys from her retribution. With Ianthe here this year, she makes everyone wake up 2 hours before the dawn and participate in her sunrise ceremony.
I would have been so pissed. I would have been so pissed.
The only reason you got to wake up before dawn is for a really fun trip.
And I'm a morning person, but that would be a hard pass.
And then you have children and
there it is.
Anyway, like Feyre, Ianthe is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And while Feyre manipulates her role as Feyre Cauldron Blessed Cursebreaker, Ianthe manipulates with her role as High Priestess, using religion and her devotion to it as her mask, so no one recognizes her efforts as self-absorbed and controlling as she does her best to get an upper hand in this land and with its people. But unfortunately for Ianthe, Feyre is 2 steps ahead of her, because as the sun finally rises and Ianthe stands on her discreet marker so it can rise and shine between her upraised arms, painting a holy picture as the sun fills this high priestess with light.
Quote, Ianthe's back arched, her body a mere vessel for the solstice's light to fill, and what I could see of her face was already limed in pious ecstasy.
Even before you did that tone, what a sexual sentence that was.
Ianthe loves her drama, dude.
And instead, the sun glows on Feyre. Somehow, someway, a phantom wind that was definitely not Feyre moved the marker. So Ianthe was standing in the wrong spot. Oh my God. And Feyre was where the sunlight hit. Feyre releases the damper on her power, so her body turns incandescent as light shines through. Quote, pure as day, pure as starlight. Starlight! Nicole, I think you're onto something from our ACOWAR episode 9, Maasverse Madness.
Oh, don't worry. It's in today's Maasverse Madness as well.
This is such a power move against Ianthe, and it is playing right into what the people expect from Feyre. The Cauldron has chosen to bless Feyre on this day instead of Ianthe, and everyone is quite surprised. Lucien seems to realize how much this is pissing off Ianthe, so he just, puts a nail in the coffin by taking Feyre's hand and kneeling on one knee in front of her.
This is so Lancelot and Guinevere coded. I love it. Which, if Tamlin is then King Arthur, it's just playing on the jealousy so much deeper and so much, it's so good because of Lancelot and Guinevere's romance. But here, it is so apt for Feyre and Lucien's friendship. Yes, Lucien is like, Feyre, you're real sus, girl, until it means fucking with Ianthe. And then he's like, I'll do whatever you want me to. Even if Feyre the entire time was manipulating the ceremony so that, because at the beginning, Feyre and Lucien were standing amongst, like Branagh Dagden, Jury, and like all these people. But one by one during the ceremony, they started to go up to the altar where Ianthe was. And so then it was just Feyre and Lucien standing in the grass together. It was honestly like, yes, we're going to roast Feyre a lot in this episode. This is brilliant. This is so good.
Which, once after he kneels, then that makes everyone else fall to their knees too, yes. Basking in the presence of Feyre Cauldron blessed. I can already hear Reese's laughter at this stunt.
This is such a brilliant power move because it's taking away the power from Ianthe and thus from Tamlin, because Ianthe is the one who's really running the court. And instead having people believe that Feyre is the actual salvation. Like, it is brilliant. I love it. This is calculation that is so smart. This is the smart calculation. We'll talk about that more in a bit. Then the night begins of avoiding Ianthe, because Ianthe the entire night at the summer solstice is like trying to grab anyone and being like, the sun altered its path because of this reason. Like, she's so funny. And Feyre is also spending the evening dancing the night away with Tamlin and attempting not to strangle him.
Again, Feyre is being smart here with how she manipulates Tamlin. She is using a past memory filled with love and happiness to set a trap for him, as she intends for this good time with him to make him finally take the leap and try to be intimate again.
So, a little after midnight, Feyre retires to her room and tosses and turns in her bed, pretending to have dreams of the Adder, the Weaver, and her sisters being thrown into the cauldron. All of this is a ruse to make it look like she had a nightmare. Remember, Fae can smell fear. The bed needs to be tossed and turned so it looks like she was, thrashing in her sleep. And she jolts, quote unquote, awake with a sharp cry, loud enough for a certain someone across the hall to hear. So when she goes and knocks on that certain someone's door, that certain someone would concernedly answer on the second knock. Like, I love that Lucien comes up and he's like frantically putting his pants on, like he's shirtless, like he sprinted from bed when he heard her cry. Which just, Lucien. Feyre silently asks to enter his room and he lets her in, leaving the door open. However, Feyre sneakily puts an air shield on the door so that Lucien would not be able to scent Tamlin when he arrived. She opens up to Lucien about her, again, dream, quote unquote, saying that she was being tortured just like Claire Better. Never forget you, Claire! She's actually mentioned so much more often in these series than I thought she was. And of course, I just turn it up about 10 notches. At the feigned fear and overwhelm at her not a dream, Lucien comes over to her. He pauses, however, just about a foot away from Feyre. But Feyre throws her arms around him, nuzzling into his naked chest and using the gift from Tarquin to summon fake tears to run down her face. Note that Feyre is in this like lacy nightgown that she used to wear for Tamlin's enjoyment, which means that it's sexy. And again, Lucien is shirtless and has hastily buttoned his pants, which makes it look like I took that as like a show don't tell of the buttons are like they're one off, or like they don't look like they've fully gotten back on, if you know what I mean. So Lucien holds her and he says, "I'm sorry." And oh my God, there's so much remorse in those two words. Yes, he is saying, "I'm sorry that you had a nightmare," but he's also saying, "I'm sorry I didn't step in under the mountain. I'm sorry I didn't step in last year. I'm sorry you're still having these dreams of this horrifying time when few people reached a hand out to you." And so she pulls back and looks into his concerned face. She's taking big, heaving breaths. Her mouth parts slightly. And then we hear from the door, "What's going on here?" So, before we talk about how this is all a setup for Tamlin's jealousy and to pry, a deeper wedge between Tamlin and Lucien, I'm going to take a minute and absolutely eviscerate Feyre, because I understand what she's doing here is strategic warfare. I get that. But when I think about Feyre's goal in the Spring Court, it is absolutely wanting to destroy Tamlin. Tamlin, not Lucien. And in order to destroy Tamlin, he cannot have his number one emissary at his side. Yes, so she does need to drive a wedge between them. But I really don't like that she is sexually and emotionally manipulating Lucien here. Was Lucien great to her last book? No. He was in the whole buying into the unified front from Tamlin. He was on Tamlin's side more than her. I'm not saying that he did not fuck up last book. Did he try to fight for her when she needed him most? No. Did he say that he was hunting her when they were in the Night Court Forest? Yes, he did. But he is desperately trying to correct his mistake and heal their friendship. I think what makes me really mad on his behalf is that he has been sexually manipulated by Ianthe to the point of literally trembling in her presence. And while Feyre is not taking it to nearly the same lengths that Ianthe did, she is still sexualizing him.
And using him for her own gains with no care for the consequences he must endure, specifically with Tamlin.
In my opinion, this is one of the reasons this chapter stretch was so hard for me to root for Feyre, because she is making him, meaning Lucien, noticeably uncomfortable. All the while, Feyre is also disgusted at Ianthe for what she did to Lucien and sympathizing with Lucien about how he feels in her presence. Like, does she realize she's not, again, it's not nearly to the same extent that Ianthe does it. Like, Ianthe literally grabbed Rhys by the balls last book. Like,
oh yeah, she like has every intention of sexually assaulting these men, while Feyre is doing this, to get back at Tamlin, and she would never actually do this with Lucien. So of course there is no comparison with who is truly ultimately worse.
Yes.
And yet they don't know that about Feyre. So Lucien's feelings and the consequences for him, they're not even on her radar. She waits to make sure Tamlin didn't kill Lucien, which was a very real possibility, to smile. Like, that's when she smiles. And she's like,
remember the sentries that he just killed last book? Like,
yeah, and yeah, exactly. And she's like, well, haha, I have more work to do. Like, having no remorse for this, or like really any feeling that she just did something not okay with Lucien. Again, it's showing us that while she's doing her job well, she is so laser focused on dishing out revenge on Tamlin that she doesn't realize or care that she's burning everything else around her. Nope. Instead, she is smug and cockily basking in her villain era.
But back to the scene at hand. Feyre and Lucien fling apart far too fast to be casual, and we get our first claw watch of the book. Wow. Like, we're over an hour in, and I can't believe this is the first one. But Tamlin's claws are just peeking out about halfway from his knuckles, which honestly shocks me that it's just the beginning of claws. I feel like if this was ACOWAR, those claws would have not only punched out, but they, like, never forget the moment he literally bitch slapped himself with his own goddamn claws. Like, I feel like it would have been one of those moments, but I don't know, maybe Tamlin's getting more of a control over his emotions. Nope, that's actually not true given what happens in a few chapters. Feyre grabs Tamlin's hand and pulls him out of the room before Lucien can say anything to defend himself. Tamlin that she had a nightmare, and then says goodnight and closes the door in his face. Wow. Feyre knew that Tamlin, with their dancing, their long glances at the summer solstice celebration, he would come to her room tonight feeling like he had a green light to, hey, maybe she's ready to be intimate again. So she staged this whole freaking thing, faking the nightmare, instead prying on Tamlin's biggest fear from day one here. Quote, I had not forgotten that long ago fight he'd picked with Lucien, the warning he gave him to stop flirting with me, to stay away. So I went back to the scene in ACOWAR. It was the morning after Feyre helped patch up Tamlin's hand when he went to go fight the Bogey. Him and Lucien were in the dining room, shocking, arguing about how Tamlin isn't even trying to get in with Feyre. Quote from ACOWAR, it was a mistake from the start. I couldn't stomach it. Not after what my father did to their kind, to their lands. I wouldn't follow in his footsteps, wouldn't be that sort of person. So back off is exactly what Feyre brings up in this scene here. It is interesting that she's looking at that scene as a, she's mine, bro. Because personally, I did not get that vibe from that scene at all. There were scenes, yes, where she, chose to ride with Lucien after blowing off Tamlin, and Tamlin was clearly jealous. So that insecurity is definitely there. I'm not saying it's not. It's more the scene that she's pulling. I didn't get a jealous vibe. Did you?
Not really from that one, but I think it's not necessarily one specific conversation that she's thinking of, but it was just like a fluid theme throughout those early days with them.
Yeah, that's a good point. She knows Tamlin, and she knows that now he is running through every single conversation since that moment, again, a year ago, to wonder if Lucien and Feyre have been having this like super secret romance behind his back this entire time. Again, preying on his biggest insecurity of being less than, weak, the second choice.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I kind of feel bad for Tamlin in this instance.
All right.
Because he was so full of hope during the summer solstice with them dancing and things seeming like they were on the up and up. And then he gathers up the courage to go to her room, which is something he hasn't done since they came back from Hybern weeks ago. And he's got to be a little bit nervous to put himself out there. And he finds her and Lucien wrapped in each other's arms instead. And then she just closes the door in his face. I'm not saying that Tamlin doesn't deserve this, but my heart did just hurt a tiny bit for him. Maybe it's just the empathetic person I am. In our ACOWAR coverage, we talked a lot about how lonely he is and how he hasn't had emotional support like, say, Rhys has had to help him be a better version of himself. And that is on full display here. So, yeah, after what Feyre pulls here, I'm not surprised he completely spirals after this war is over and he has nothing and no one.
To be fair, he does have Lucien, but the reason he doesn't have Lucien in the same way like Rhys has the Inner Circle is because Tamlin does not let Lucien in the same way. But yes, I agree with you.
That is a very good point. Yes.
Though the next morning, it does look like Tamlin has talked to Lucien because Lucien is now staying a very healthy distance away from Feyre. I'm not going to lie. I was like, so she can't have guy friends? But then I was like, never mind. Like, it looked like they were fucking. That's actually extremely fair.
I'd actually argue that he is totally okay with them being just friends.
Oh, yeah.
And it's when she specifically crossed the line that he's like, whoa.
Agreed completely. But who is relishing in this love triangle drama? This will shock you. Ianthe. When discussing who will go to the wall, it's noted that Feyre and Lucien will be with the Hybern delegation. And she says to Tamlin, perhaps you should go, my friend. You know the character in Lord of the Rings who's like whispering in the King of Rohan's ear and it's like draining him from all things that are life? That is Ianthe, that little worm, that stupid little worm.
She's literally like flaring the flames, not realizing that Feyre purposefully set this all on fire in the first place. Like she's like trying to like, aha, look what I'm doing. And Feyre's like, hey, I started the fire.
Ianthe has like two tiny little flames and she's like fanning the flames. Meanwhile, Feyre's behind her with like a leaf blower, like fanning the flames that way.
She's the Elmo.
Yes. Note that Ianthe says, quote, you'll never know when the Night Court will come to snatch her away. Ianthe is also prying on Tamlin's biggest fears here. Going back to your point of feeling sympathy for Tamlin, I do feel a little bit of sympathy for him here because he is being manipulated left and right by Feyre, by Ianthe, by the King of Hybern. I have minute amount of sympathy for him because he dug his own grave.
Oh, he absolutely did. And maybe if he was better at playing the game, he's just laying dormant here and it's just so passive. Like, he's such a passive person.
I know.
And he's not proactive in the slightest. And that is really on full display here.
Little moment I do want to pull out from this breakfast scene is that Ianthe mentions that as a threat to the Night Court, Tamlin should send Rhys's mother and sister's wings that his father had pinned in his study. And Tamlin admits that he had them burned a long time ago. Quote from Feyre's inner monologue: "I could have sworn there was something like remorse and shame in his words." Small points for Tamlin here. This is a good job, my guy. You get one this episode.
You get 1 point.
Our crew, minus Tamlin and Ianthe, set out to the wall. On the first night in the woods, as Feyre and Lucien are sharing a tent, which again, Lucien, as he walks into the tent, he's like, maybe this isn't such a good idea. He is noticeably uncomfortable. And Feyre's like, you idiot, get in here. And I'm like, you asshole, you've made him uncomfortable in this way. Anyway, they're laying in the tent, whatever, together. Feyre begins asking him about the deal with Hybern if there's any way around it. We learn that the King of Hybern designed the bargain too cleverly, and if he breaks the bargain magic, it will strike Tamlin. I love that Feyre says, in what way? Kill him? Like, don't get too excited here, Feyre. Calm down. But the answer is maybe. Magic likes all things in balance. So it could claim Tamlin's life, or it could have his magic taken away, or it could claim the life of someone he cares about. We will learn that Lucien went to the day court to see if there was anything that he and Tamlin could do around the bargain with Rhys. But they were working too slowly. Tamlin was being pushed to Hybern by Ianthe, again being manipulated by her. And when Lucien returned from hunting Feyre in the woods of the Night Court, Tamlin finally decided to pull the plug and go ally with Hybern. Oh, and we also learned in this little conversation with Lucien that Tamlin trashed the room, his study, the bedroom, half the manor, basically, when Feyre left, and he killed all the sentries on guard when she was taken. To Lucien's credit, he did try to stop him from killing the sentries. Quote, I begged him for mercy. He didn't listen. He couldn't listen. So when they were between a rock and a hard place, it was either go to war with the Night Court and eventually Hybern as well, or ally with Hybern. Quote, let them try to stir up trouble and then use that alliance to our own advantage further down the road. And when Faye was like, I'm sorry, what did you just say? You what? Quote, Lucien realized what he said and he hedged. We have enemies in every court. Having Hybern's alliance will make them think twice. And Feyre thinks, liar, trained, clever liar. So Lucien does know about the spy plan on Tamlin's part, or at least he hedges.
So here's my headcanon. Last episode, I said how I believe Tamlin didn't ally with Hybern to play spy. He allied with Hybern to get Feyre back, and then it worked out for him to be a spy, making the best out of a really bad situation. Lucien saying here, quote, use that alliance to our own advantage further down the road is exactly right. And as far as Tamlin considered with his, I'm a spy plan, right now in this alliance with Hybern, Tamlin's only plan is to use it to his advantage when the opportunity comes up. That's the plan. Like I've said, he's not a proactive double agent. Like everything else Tamlin does, he will be a reactive spy. So Lucien is aware of the current plan. Use this alliance to their advantage when the time is right. That's literally how baked the plan is. But what he doesn't know is how Tamlin will ultimately use that. And I don't even want to say he doesn't know the extent to which Tamlin is a spy because Tamlin himself doesn't even know it quite yet. What I will say here, while I understand all of this, and while it is really cleverly in character for Tamlin, what I don't understand is why Tamlin and Lucien don't let Feyre in on this plan to help ease her distress that they're opening their doors and borders to Hybern. Like that is the whole issue that she has with them. And there's plenty of opportunities for them to be like, okay, hold your horses here because here's our plan. And it would take a sentence to say it, but at least it would give some more context.
There's two different things why I think that's happened. Number one, I'm looking at it from a storytelling standpoint. That later Tamlin in the High Lords meeting saying, I'm playing spy this entire time. And then everyone not knowing which one it is. Like that uncertainty in that scene is so delicious. And if we had it here, we would know for certain in that scene that Tamlin was playing spy. So there would be less conflict later. But then also I think about it here and Feyre last book asked, please tell me everything. I want to be let in on, all the hooty what's its. And Tamlin said, yes, absolutely. This is the he still does not fully trust her. Show don't tell from SJM of like, he said that, yeah, but he's still also treating her like that doe-eyed damsel and only letting her in so much.
Yep.
The next morning, our campers run into a group of 3 children of the Blessed who enter through a hole in the wall. Our crew's reactions to them are very different. Branna and Dagden look at them like they just found second breakfast and 11sies, which is 2 more Lord of the Rings references than I thought I would make in this episode. And they're trying to convince the children of the Blessed to stay and enjoy the pleasures of Prythian. Lucien calls them children. Jurian has his sword out and appears torn. I love this moment because Jurian is a spy. Have we mentioned that yet? And he is putting on the performance to be like, I'm on your side with Hybern. The humans are who he is truly fighting for in the end. So torn sounds about right. Do you defend the people you're going to war for, or do you stay in your ruse? Luckily, thanks to Feyre, who breaks into their minds, which are soft like butter. I love that little description. She shows them the horrors of Prythian, the bogey, the Midgard worm, Claire Better's body. Never forget you, Claire. Enough to convince them to run away, which after they do, Jurian comes up to Feyre and thanks her for what she did, giving her a knowing smile, which obviously we will learn much later in the book. This moment of how she treated the children of the Blessed and tried to save them, that is the moment he decided to trust her. Later on that day, though, the thought of the children of the Blessed still has not left Jurian's mind. So he asks Feyre, what happens to the children who do cross the wall and don't have Daemati planting horrors into their mind? And Feyre tells him that it doesn't end well, which is, again, an understatement of the century. Jurian reminds us all that he is 500 years old, which I'm not going to lie, I forget sometimes when I'm reading. He says, quote, "We were their slaves and whores and laborers for millennia. Men and women fought and died so we'd never have to serve them again. Yet there they are in those costumes, unaware of the danger, the history."
He is the only human who was around during the war.
Yes.
For very unique reasons. And he is living in a completely new world. Can you imagine his shock when he went to the continent to go talk to the mortal queens? And now he's learning about the children of the Blessed and is quite confused.
Yeah.
He's like, wait a second. This is exactly what we fought against.
This is like,
and yet you're still human, so I have to defend you.
This is like you're a person in the Middle Ages. You go to sleep for a nippy nap and you wake up and you're in the year 2024. Like, he is having such a culture shock right now. And he's looking at these children of the Blessed being like, are you like, what did I fight for 500 years ago? Are you serious? I'm not going to lie. I think Jurian is slowly becoming one of the most interesting characters in this.
I love Jurian. And I can't believe we are saying that. Yes.
I love him.
And then he will help Feyre rescue the tortured but still alive child of the Blessed from the Hybern camp during the Elaine rescue mission.
Jurian admits to having unfinished business here, and the foreshadowing of his I Am the Spy performance is so on display. He is so carefully executing this masterful mission that he's doing. I would argue better than Feyre. We hear some of his side of the story when it comes to Miriam in this scene, though. Remember, up until this, Feyre has known Jurian to be an accessory for 500 years, someone who went mad over the obsession of winning the war, and now who is mad over his obsession with getting Miriam back. But here, Jurian tells us that 500 years ago, Miriam told him to go and seduce Clythia and fuck her for information on Hybern and the Loyalists. Then she left him for Draken the moment he put his people before her. Again, this is Jurian's side of the story. We will later learn that while here, it seems like he's mad at her for leaving him for Draken, he actually holds no anger for either of them and instead wants to beg their forgiveness, although he is obviously having to put on a front right now. There's a lot of different storylines happening when it comes to this. It's so confusing. When Feyre asks if all of his allying with Hybern is to get Miriam back, he says, quote, "It's to draw her out of her little nest with that winged prick and make her regret it." Which is kind of true. I'll say it's kind of true. He wants to draw out Miriam and Draken from their peaceful island of Cretea so that Draken's aerial legion can help them turn the tides of the war. I would argue the winged prick and make her regret it section. That's really what I would argue. And I do love this. When Feyre chastises him for spending this as his second shot at life, this meaning revenge, like devoting the second shot at life to revenge, he's like, bitch, that's what you're doing. And I love that a human knows that Feyre is faking and Tamlin doesn't. Like, wow. But it's not because he's just observing her, which he is, but it's also because he knew Rhysand 500 years ago. Rhys actually risked his legion to save Miriam from enemy hands. Even though he knew it was a trap originally set for Draken, Rhys went in his stead. And that is how he got captured by Amarantha and, tortured. And he was watching the duel with Jurian, all of that stuff that we talked about in chapter 54. As he explains here, everyone pretends that Rhys is evil and this knight triumphant murderer, but the male that Jurian knew was the most decent of them all. Quote, "The most powerful High Lord in the world lost his mate and has not yet come to claim her, even when she is defenseless in the woods. Perhaps that's because Rhysand has not lost you at all, but rather unleashed you upon us."
Their conversation ends with Jurian giving Feyre a warning. On a first read, it certainly sounds like a threat when he says, Hybern will kill all of you. But through the Jurian as a spy lens, I think it is more of him warning Feyre. He knows that she is a spy. Oh, like we've said, oh my gosh, there are so many spies in this stretch, like keeping track of who's who. And I also think that he recognizes her cockiness. She thinks she is outsmarting everyone else. But the only one she's truly outsmarting seems to be Tamlin. And Jurian is calling her out on her smugness and I'm playing the game better than all of you, swagger. And under a veiled threat, he's telling her, no, you're not. She has to be on her guard because Hybern will kill her and all that she holds dear if she isn't more careful. It's the next morning, and alas, Feyre's efforts to save the children of the Blessed from a fate worse than quick death does not work out. Again, we get that we are a team language and vibes from Feyre and Lucien as together they work in tandem to track down where the smell of the blood is coming from. Jurian has a hard, brooding mask over his face while the sentries are pale after witnessing what happened. In other words, Jurian is all too familiar with this kind of Hybern/Amarantha carnage after being forced to witness it for 500 years, and he's just pissed right now instead of being outwardly revolted. The three humans who had heeded Feyre's mind work and danger warnings were unfortunately tracked down by the two Hybern royals on the mortal realm side of the wall. They killed them simply because they could and wanted to, and from the looks of their remains, they were killed in a similar mutilating and torment fashion as Claire and the Golden Queen. And not only that, but the Hybern twins brought them back to near the campsite, not bothering to clean up their mess and to make a statement to the Spring Court and specifically Feyre. They're telling her that Hybern does not get denied and that they will do what they want with who they want, and there's nothing Feyre can do about it. The subtle power struggle between the Hybern twins and the Spring Court, or should I say Feyre, is no longer subtle. This is an immortal temper tantrum, as Lucien puts it, but it is also Hybern reminding them who's in charge and what they're capable of.
I love the moment where we really get to see Lucien's smarts on display, where Feyre's like, what do we do? Do we bury them? And he's like, no, because it sends a message that we're going to clean up their mess. And it's just like, you're getting to see him as an emissary a lot more. I love that moment from Lucien. But Feyre and Lucien, they're about to go on a bogey hunt, and I bet they need some good fuel, not laced with Faebane, to help them withstand hours of looking through the forest for a monster. That is where Factor comes in. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, whether you're working or going bogey hunting, you'll always have time to enjoy a nutritious, great tasting meal.
With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have more flavors to explore. I love that I never get tired of the meals because there's just so many options. And if you know me, keeping my prep time to a minimum is a must. Well, with Factor, you can have a restaurant quality meal ready in just 2 minutes, which makes this mama oh so happy.
You know that saying that's like yummy in my tummy? Factor is yummy in my tummy, which is one of Lexi's child's favorite sayings, and it makes me so happy. Factor has so many different meal options that are packed with flavor. You guys know I love my spices. I just had the Southwest chicken with cilantro cauliflower rice, and cauliflower rice can sometimes be like this is bland. This was so delicious. It was so flavorful. It was literally chef's kiss.
Head to factor.com/fantasyfangirl50 and use code fantasyfangirl50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code fantasyfangirl50 at factormeals.com/fantasyfangirl50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active.
Upon returning from the multi-day wall investigation, we immediately know that something went down, given that Tamlin is giving Lucien and Feyre a talking to. After the children of the Blessed were found torn apart and murdered, remember, they're brutally murdered, Lucien and Feyre took matters of sending a message into their own hands. Lucien tracked down the bogey, which, nice job, Lucien, given that it took Tamlin multiple days to track down in ACOWAR. And both of them lured it carefully back to Branna and Dagden at the camp. Even though the twins managed to get away, it was not without a healthy dose of fear and terror. Which, side note, how are these fuckers still alive? Like, if you react to the bogey, it materializes and can kill you.
Exactly. Hence their terror and their screaming. Tamlin cannot believe that they dared to send the bogey after them. It's like, you literally tried to kill them because that is what the bogey does. And, because they are Hybern royalty and they're badasses, essentially, as much as we hate them, they did barely escape death there.
But Tamlin does not really care about their reasoning behind sending a terrifying creature after them. Instead, he is furious over the fact that they jeopardized this alliance with Hybern.
See, like I was saying earlier, this would be a great moment to say to them, we need to pretend to be all in with this alliance, and then we will strike back when the stakes to save the entire world are a little higher than this pettiness, It wouldn't invalidate Feyre and Lucien's points here, but it might give Feyre that little wink, wink, nudge, nudge she can really use as she understandably believes Tamlin is 110% with Hybern here.
So let's take a moment and look at this through Tamlin's POV, because that's what we do. Now, yes, Tamlin is between a rock and a hard place, and he does feel wildly out of control in his own court. And Tamlin is in a hole of his own making. And of course, because it's Tamlin, he's not taking responsibility and is instead doing the classic move of being a passive leader. As Lucien points out, quote, Feyre gave the royals an order to stand down. They ignored it. If we let Hybern walk all over us, we stand to lose more than their alliance. The bogey reminded them that we aren't without our claws too. Facts, Lucien, facts. However, Tamlin cannot risk this alliance because if Hybern turns its attention on attacking the Spring Court, they're obliterated in seconds. Like, they will not even stand a breaths of a chance.
Which is partly why Feyre is so mad at him for selling out the Spring Court to get her, emphasis on partly why. Tamlin went into a bargain with a far more powerful and cunning person. He is not, and nor ever was, on equal footing with the King of Hybern, and he is just really at his mercy. Tamlin doesn't like being the weaker one, though, so it's like he's got his head buried in the sand pretending like this is an alliance instead of being Hybern's bitch. And at the same time, he does recognize their disadvantage, and he's kissing Hybern's ass to not get on their wrong side. Even if that means dismissing or probably having a certain talking to about the murder of 3 innocents. This episode's analysis is a flippin' roller coaster, which is partly why I do love these characters so much. They have depth and so many different angles and emotions, and they can be contradictory to one another while still felt at the same time. We all in real life feel that very much so, where it's like, I feel this way and I feel this way and I'm doing this, but I'm trying to do it's so much more nuanced and complex and layered than a lot of books do kind of portray characters. So I love this.
So Tamlin white knuckle grabs onto control with the only people that he has control over, which is Feyre and Lucien. Or at least I'll say he thinks he has control over, which is Feyre and Lucien. Specifically Lucien, though, who Tamlin forces out of the study. Lucien doesn't go too far. Lucien, along with 6 sentries, are in the hallway listening to Feyre and Tamlin's conversation. I just love that he's not going too far. I think it's mostly because he wants to know what's going on in that room, but I think it's also he knows Tamlin's temper and he wants to protect Feyre, and that's really sweet. I love Lucien. Feyre uses this opportunity to her advantage. She knows Tamlin's temper and lack of control over his own emotions. So, using words, she stabs him and twists the knife. She throws in his face how the people at the Spring Court are pissed that Hybern is here because Tamlin wanted to get her back, insinuating that he did not care about his people at all. She says, quote, "You think I don't see it in their faces? The question of whether I'm worth the dishonor of it?" God, I love that line.
As much as Feyre is purposefully riling Tamlin up, she is also expressing her truth here. She is so angry at him for, quote, whoring us out to Hybern, and she is finally telling him how she really feels. With, of course, manipulation layered in there about how she's the one trying to regain some of what they lost. But again, there is definitely truth in what she is saying here from her own heart.
Well, and she's also poking at his fear of appearing as an incompetent leader. She is just, again, twisting that knife. And unsurprisingly, we have a claw watch and the claws completely slide free. Then she also picks at him being weak and submissive. Ooh, she says, quote, "You might be willing to get on your knees for Hybern, but I certainly am not." Wow.
That calls back to how Rhys made him get on his knees too.
Bingo.
And so she knows that is a sensitive topic.
Oh, and then the study explodes. The first time Tamlin makes the study explode, because yes, this is the second time we've talked about it on a podcast. Feyre, aka his supposed love of his life, has to unconsciously use her powers to shield herself from the destruction. Remember, back then, she was not trained because Tamlin did not want her to train, and she protected herself on pure instinct. Tamlin afterward was immediately hugging her, begging for her forgiveness, saying that he will never do this again. And here we are. Here, Feyre does egg him on because she knows he has no control over his anger and is 100% capable of putting her in this danger again. But unlike her instincts of shielding last time, this time she does not put up a shield. And when Lucien barges in horror, her bruises, cuts, and the destruction of the room make Tamlin look like a fucking monster. And in that moment, Tamlin just stares in horror at what he's done again. Lucien has apologized for what he did in the Spring Court previously, and he is stepping up. And while he didn't say it, the subtext behind Lucien's apologies were, "It will never happen again." He is upholding his end of the bargain. He is upholding his end of that promise versus Tamlin, who has done this before and promised out loud never to let it happen again. He is, again, letting it happen, showing that he has not changed or he has not had that emotional full circle. Did she manipulate him into this anger? Yes, but it is his responsibility on what to do with that anger.
Exactly. Like when she really says what she's feeling, when it's really hard for him to hear it, he does not respond well.
Can't help but read the scene and think back to what we discussed when we talked about the first study breaking scene about the cycle of abuse, which is tension, incident, reconciliation, and calm. The tension was Feyre twisting the knife. She was poking at every single one of his insecurities. And like Lexi said, she was sharing her truth. The incident obviously here is Tamlin exploding the study. The reconciliation is him. Yes, he does apologize. He runs out of the room. He says, "Feyre, I'm sorry." And she goes, "It's fine. It's fine." And it's like, it's heartbreaking. God.
And she's like, no, everyone knew that it wasn't fine.
Well, because she's covered in bruises and blood. Like last time she did not have the physical evidence other than the emotional scarring. That is not lesser than physical evidence. I want to be very clear on that. She does now have the physical evidence and people are looking at her like, oh my God, who is the man we're supporting?
And it's only because she's not hiding
exactly
what happened.
And yes, this is her manipulating Tamlin, but still did it. So yes, she is manipulating him. However, he still performed the actions that left her with cuts and bruises and blood on her face. So Lucien, I also want to point out back to the cycle. It is a cycle for a reason. It's not you just go through it once and you're done. It's a cycle. You go through it again and again and again. I'm going to say not all the time. I need to make that very clear, but it is called the cycle of abuse for a reason. Versus Lucien, who literally learned from his mistakes and he is immediately like gets her out of the study. He does not even look back at him. Like he is disgusted by him. And the sentries are as well. And this is the beginning of them starting to sympathize with Feyre rather than holding stock in their High Lord.
As part of her ploy to turn the Spring Court against its High Lord, Feyre takes a ride the next day and makes sure the sentries are aware of her pain from Tamlin's outburst. He set up the dominoes and made them ready to fall, while Feyre tipped one to make the rest go down. Because yes, Feyre Cauldron Blessed was physically hurt by her High Lord, and by simply not hiding it, Tamlin's court is starting to question if he is someone they want to follow. His actions toward sweet and innocent Feyre do not sit well with good old Bronn and Hart, or most anyone else minus Ianthe and the Hybern Royals.
Let's change subjects and go into Ianthe. Oh, Ianthe. It's not anything that's going to make me less mad. In an effort to regain control after...
We're going to need to have like a drink after this.
Yeah, I'm going to need a shot after this for sure. My blood is boiling.
We're out of the spring court for good. Thank God. At least, until Cassian would come back. But anyway, then it's funny because there's allergies.
I do kind of as we're going through this episode, I'm like, maybe more and more I'm understanding Feyre's thirsty bloodlust and her emotional tunnel vision. Oh boy, I'm getting heated. All right, in an effort to regain control after Feyre stole the show at the summer solstice, Ianthe decided it would be a great idea to use her magic to make a guard fall asleep, steal the keys to the manor, give the keys to the Naga, and let them wreak havoc on the manor's grounds. Wow. Feyre, who's been tracking Ianthe's movements, saw every step of this scheming, though.
And she thinks how it played into everything she'd laid out. I will say I've always been a little bit confused how exactly Feyre laid this trap for Ianthe to walk straight into. At first, I thought she was just referring to what happened at the summer solstice, where Feyre stole the spotlight and knew Ianthe would retaliate to regain her sacredness in the eyes of the people and therefore get control back. But I'm realizing on this reread that Feyre tracked Ianthe's movements after she left the party, saw what she did, and then I guess Feyre used her powers to make the guard forget that he saw Ianthe, and she waited to uncoil them and make him share the memory at the opportune time. I might debate how much this was truly Feyre's perfectly executed everything was laid out trap, because she shouldn't have initially known that Ianthe would take these exact actions as her retaliation. But I think that's kind of the point here. As much as Feyre is puppeteering, she is cocky enough to believe she's the ultimate puppet master.
But what of that guard who fell asleep on duty and, quote, let the Naga come in and take the keys? He has to be dealt with by receiving 20 lashes and then one more for the Cauldron's forgiveness. But don't worry, that punishment is Ianthe's demand, not Tamlin's, showing us who is really in charge here.
We have to ask, how is this different from Tamlin executing the sentries who failed and guarding Feyre when she was taken? And the answer lies in the reason why. When Tamlin executed the sentries, which still was not okay, I should make that very clear, in case you didn't know. My opinions on that. His reason was that they failed at their jobs protecting the most important thing to Tamlin. Everyone else may have been horrified, and Lucien tried to stop it, but they knew he was within his right to punish them, even if there was disagreement for how severe it was. In this case, though, Feyre navigates it so that the truth comes to light. The sentry truthfully blames Ianthe, and Ianthe denies it so much that everyone realizes what he said is indeed the truth. Even though he knows the sentry isn't the one to blame, he still punishes him instead of Ianthe because he's openly choosing to side with the person who is at fault, thus sending the clear message that he is no longer a harsh but just leader who shows his strength when he must. Nope, he is now at Ianthe and Hybern's mercy, choosing to place his loyalty with them despite knowing the truth right in front of him.
I would also like to point out that in the scene, it says, quote, Tamlin opened his mouth, but Ianthe cut him off. Ianthe cut off a High Lord. Yes, she is a High Priestess. That is still under High Lord in power ranking. He has no power right now, and it shows in obvious neon signs. And repeatedly, again, she is telling him what to do, how many lashes to give out. No wonder the sentries are like, peace out, Squirrel Scout. This is ridiculous.
Feyre hardly had to manipulate this situation. In fact, I'll argue she acted exactly the way she would always want to, double agent or no. And the reason she's being manipulative in this situation is more so with strategic timing and thinking 2 steps ahead, aware of how this situation will play out. But her actions are still very much in character for her and do indeed tie back to what happened at the tithe. She wants to give the small folk the benefit of the doubt, treating them with decency and respect. She has a human heart after all, and that's on full display here, spy or no, which only amplifies the contrast between her and Tamlin. She is strong and defiant against evil. She cares for all, no matter their station. Whereas Tamlin folds to the enemy to keep up appearances, and he doesn't protect those he is supposed to protect first and always. During the scene, Ianthe thinks she won this round because she won Tamlin. She proved that she has more sway with him than anyone else here. Which I get it. Seems like a win at face value. But I love how Feyre knows how to play the game better. She recognizes how important reputations are for politicians. And if the High Lord of the Spring Court is stripped back to show his true self, then his people won't want to follow him anymore. Especially because these same people chose to follow him when he became High Lord and did things very differently from his father, causing plenty of his father's loyal followers to leave. Never forget that when Tamlin became High Lord, he did things really differently, and a lot of people who were on his father's side, who sided with his father, were like, all right, well then we want nothing to do with you. And the people who believed in Tamlin and his values stayed. And those people are
now
seeing a whole other side to Tamlin here.
We do need to look at the big picture from these chapters and how the series of events is leading to Tamlin and the Spring Court's downfall. After the study was destroyed and Feyre was left with cuts and bruises at Tamlin's hand, the guards and sentries are now doubting their loyalty to Tamlin and instead sympathizing with Feyre. Here, in this moment at the whipping, unfortunately, Feyre is standing up for the guards, not Tamlin, further cementing the doubt that, maybe she actually cares for us and will fight for us more than our High Lord. Might we remind you what happened under the mountain? She went in and made a 3-month deal and fought for them more than their High Lord did. So this is, if anything, getting that full circle. So that when she leaves the Spring Court in the next stretch of chapters, why would they stay and fight for someone who doesn't believe or care for them or will even fight for them in the first place? Not to mention, the guards are well aware that Tamlin is aware of Ianthe's involvement in this scene. This is what just was the stupid move from Tamlin's part, in my opinion.
I understand his POV where if he does believe his guards, then that shows a very bad message to Hybern. And
who is he doing all of this for in the first place?
That was still the right thing to do. It's like, come on, Tamlin, you got to take a risk here, and you got to then deal with the consequences with Hybern and figure it out.
Not to mention, Ianthe is saying, like, you would believe the word of a guard over the word of a high priestess? Like, what? Like, why would you do that? The subtext there is the guard's word is nothing compared to hers. Like, she is on a pedestal above him. And then when Tamlin thinks to stand up for the guards, she cuts him off. She fucking, he opens his mouth and she cuts him off. It is a clear signal that she is in charge, not Tamlin. So why would they want to serve for someone who's not standing up for their own court, but then yielding to someone who's selling them out to Hybern? This is the clear sign to the sentries that they are no longer fighting for Tamlin. They are fighting for Ianthe, because Tamlin is now bowing to Ianthe, metaphorically. In the first book, they were loyal to Tamlin. They went over the wall. They sacrificed themselves, literally, like their lives, willing to break a curse. And this, not believing them, not siding for them, not standing up for them, this is how he shows his thanks for all that they did. This moment is really the nail in the coffin of Tamlin's downfall. It is the neon sign for them to start questioning if this is the man they want to be serving. And the answer to that question is no. We will get into the discussion around the decision that they end up making later, but this quote really finalizes it. Quote, "The thunderous crack as it cleaved the air snapped through the barracks, the estate, through the very foundations of the court." At the end of the day, if we're looking at this from like a super zoomed out view, Tamlin and Hybern are her enemies. Obviously, she does not know that Tamlin and Jurian are being a spy. In war, you got to take down your enemies, and that does mean some strategy. And Feyre is destroying an enemy with very little casualties of innocence. I do have to give her that. And as far as a political move, I think her goal makes a lot of sense, and it's fair. However, I am all here for the calculating, confident chess-playing Feyre. This stretch, for the most part, was not that. Feyre is acting with I am mightier than you, I am smarter than you, I am above all of you attitude. It's not calculated. And for that reason, this is a really tough stretch for me with Feyre. I love Feyre. She is one of my favorite SJM women. this is a really tough stretch for me to root for her. Where Rhys is scheming and looking at all the different possibilities, the outcomes, the consequences. Yes, he's 500 years old. He's had a lot of time to, practice this. In this stretch, Feyre is not being Rhysand. She is not looking at all the possibilities. She's definitely not looking at all the consequences. If she was, she would have noticed the Fae-bane in the food. She would notice why are all of us having headaches? And why are my cuts not healing as fast as they should? She would also notice how she's treating Lucien. She would also notice the wink, wink, hint, hint moves from Jurian. Is she driven by anger? Yes. Does that make people have tunnel vision? Absolutely. We've talked endlessly about how Feyre specifically has tunnel vision when she's angry. Is she also 20 years old and playing with people who are hundreds of years older than her? Yes. So is this realistic? Yeah, I'm going to go with it is realistic. That does not mean I have to like it. That's not saying I have to enjoy it. It's really tough for me to root for Feyre but at the end of the day, yes, it's realistic. It's still not my favorite moment from Feyre because of the I am mightier than thou attitude she has all around this.
I agree with you for the most part. On the one hand, I love seeing her embrace this vengeful side as she gets back at those who wronged her.
Definitely.
She held so much anger last book during her healing journey and then was understandably in a rage when her sisters got dragged into this. So payback to Tamlin and Ianthe make me cheer her on, especially after her healing journey all of ACOWAR. Being back in the Spring Court using her powers to her advantage, being in control and manipulating those who manipulated her for so long. And with that said, I'm with you, Nicole, on how Feyre is letting her revenge blind her from the bigger picture. Do Ianthe and Tamlin deserve for everyone to see the ugly side of them? Yes. And Feyre does not logically consider the cost of her actions. She thinks the Spring Court's implosion and weakness will deter Hybern, but she is underestimating Hybern. Of course, they'll still take over. She is under the impression that the Spring Court is on Hybern's side. We should definitely make that very clear. So she would rather it be a weak ally because she has no idea they're even a possibility for helping Prythian in the war to come. That's on Tamlin for not sharing that information with her. She is working without all of the knowledge, and we can't fault her for taking action that seems beneficial in the moment. But I do need to fault Feyre for taking her revenge too far. There is a big difference between manipulating and moving the pieces to show what already exists in the High Lord and High Priestess, like what happens in the study or what happens with the Sentry and the Whipping. But then she creates scenarios that don't exist, making it seem like she and Lucien are having an affair and she doesn't care about the consequences for him. In next chapter, she will plant a false memory in a Sentry's mind that is a flat out lie about Tamlin, which we'll get into next episode, but that was not necessary because she already did do all of this. She is a little too cocky with her puppet mastery that she is blind to the bigger picture and how very real a sneaky threat the Hybern twins are, because she thinks that she can go toe to toe with them when they have, 1,000 years on her. So I'm very torn because on the one hand, I commend her for how she is manipulating and really taking ownership of this. And at the same time, she does not do it in the best way, and she definitely takes it too far because of her emotions.
Yeah, agreed completely.
Let's turn our full attention to foreshadowing important moments in this book and the rest of the series.
In the prologue, Rhys mentions how he was holding the lines just as he'd been ordered to do from his father. Later in battle, Cassian will get seriously injured trying to reform the lines and attempting to hold them all on his own.
Another moment from the prologue with Rhys thinking, quote, "I'd always thought death would be some sort of peaceful homecoming, a sweet, sad lullaby to usher me into whatever waited after." As he describes, that's clearly not the case. War is ugly and death is messy. Feyre will be overwhelmed seeing this firsthand when she and Mor are about to enter the Battle of Adriata. Yet, when Rhys does die after putting the cauldron back together, there is a sort of sweet, sad lullaby to it. He whispers, "I love you," into Feyre's mind as the life is drained from him. And from his perspective, he gets that goodbye. Nicole, we're on episode 1. You can't start crying on me yet.
Listen, I know he dies and literally less than a page later, he comes back to life. But if you listen to the graphic audio, I can't remember the name of the girl who plays Feyre, but the moment she realizes Rhys is dead, that I can, how you can't listen to Feyre killing the 3 fairies in ACOWAR? I can't listen to that again. That was it. Oh my God, it ripped my heart out.
Another one here. We get a few descriptions of Lucien's tan skin, setting us up for the big reveal that Helion is actually his father.
We also get a line, quote, "The sunlight leaking through the forest canopy, setting the red ember of his hair flickering." Sunlight and red hair, literally his two parents in one sentence.
Feyre learns from Tamlin that he is having citizens located on his western border evacuated to the east. And she thinks, quote, if east was safe, then the west, Hybern would indeed be coming from that direction, arriving there. Yes,
Shocking.
This is absolutely correct.
You mean the guy?
Right? Like, why would Hybern come from anywhere else? Yeah, exactly.
I love. No, wait, pause. I love that she says that. Like, I'm so smart, calculating inner monologue, and it's like, Hybern's a Western island. He is literally to the west. Like, what?
I will say he does have plenty of allies on the continent, but I agree with you. This is also a detail she does not seem to remember. Of course, there's a lot going on, and it's been a while later, when Hybern tricks the Prythian combined army into going north, away from his large army on the western coast in the human lands. There are several mentions about the Cauldron's power being drained after it turned Nesta and Elaine into Fae, and that's why it just can't destroy the wall easy peasy right now. The actual reason is because Nesta took some of the Cauldron's power, so it no longer has the strength to properly shatter the wall without the added help of leveraging the holes in the wall. It's not about it just needing to, rest up and get its energy back. It is that the energy is no longer there to be had for that power.
Lucien mentions that his eye is from a friend in the Dawn Court who is skilled at tinkering. We will meet this friend later during the High Lord's meeting, Nuan. I also love the irony about how he's mentioning her, a woman who will come up with the antidote to Faebane while eating food that is laced with Faebane. Brilliant.
I do have to wonder how she wasn't under the mountain, and we have to assume that her helping the Spring Court and essentially coming out of hiding, even in the slightest way, was the great risk Lucien speaks of. Because if she helped him, that must mean she was not under the mountain.
She is from Xi'an. I wonder if she went back to Xi'an?
I don't believe so, because it was very much just like that is her origin versus where she went back to. Yeah.
Feyre feels on multiple occasions the start of this little headache, this little bothersome headache, and even Tamlin mentions having one too. This is alarming, and no one thinks so. I guess they don't have like fantasy ibuprofen in this world, but still.
Well, and then Feyre's healing powers barely heal her, and she's like, well, that's odd. It must be because I'm so powerful that I repelled it too strongly. And then we also have the bond between her and Rhys being fainter and fainter.
All of this is because, as we will learn next chapter stretch, the food has been poisoned with just a little bit of Faebane.
Speaking of poisoning the food with Faebane, let's talk about Ianthe and how she coos over Jurian, which will continue. We learn from Jurian when Feyre is pretending to be Ianthe in the Hybern camp that Ianthe is lusting after Jurian these days. I assume it all started here in the Spring Court.
Thirsty bitch. I can't stand her. Jesus Christ.
During the summer solstice, Feyre thinks about how she doesn't have quarrel with the people of these lands, and she's glad to hear they're evacuating to safer areas. But this really shows her short-sightedness, because she doesn't realize that by hurting and destroying Tamlin, she is also tearing apart the Spring Court and leaving them all vulnerable to Hybern, whether they're on the west side or the east side. And this will definitely be a very big problem within weeks.
It is time to sip some tea with the Suriel. Every episode, Lexi will take some time, sit down with the Suriel, sip some tea, and walk through a world-building topic to help us better understand this world of Prythian and the people in it. What's today's topic, Lexi?
Today's Suriel topic is the Wall. The Wall is a massive barrier that divides the lands. South of the Wall is the Seven Kingdoms, and north of the Wall is the cold wilderness. The Wall is made of mostly ice and stretches for 300 miles across the border of Westeros, and it stands as tall as 700 feet. Now, the Wall is manned by the Night Watch, who guard the realms of men. Over the centuries... What?
Try again.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Wrong wall. In the ACOWAR world, The wall divides the mortal realm in the south from the Fae north of the wall's borders. The wall is both on the continent and the large island where Prythian is. The Spring Court is the only court in Prythian that borders the wall. Rhys confirms that the wall stretches across the sea, but remember, it's not on Hybern, which did not give up any of its lands to the mortals. The wall is the physical barrier between the magical territories and the mortal ones. It's like the wall keeps the magic contained to the Fae side. For instance, it is eternally spring on the north side of the wall in the Spring Court, but then you go over the wall and it's whatever season it's supposed to be in the world. Though Fae can still use their magic south of the wall, magic does work differently and shields, senses, etc. might not work right. And it is difficult to spear magic through the wall. Feyre describes the wall as, quote, a screeching, terrible vice that crushes her magic and batters her head when she does that with the Children of the Blessed. We don't have the specifics of how the wall was created, but we do know it was made by fairies who had come together with that might of power. And while it is a strong and extremely powerful barrier, the wall is actually invisible. For mortals, it's exactly that, an invisible shield that can be tapped and pushed against, but of course not seen. When a mortal goes through a hole in the wall, they can smell the metallic tang of magic and it zaps you as you go through. Fairies, on the other hand, can overwhelmingly feel its magical, quote, heavy, hideous presence even half a mile away. They may not be able to see the wall, but they can feel its wrongness with its pulsing and throbbing, hear it crackling with power, and the tang of it coats their tongues. The wall's power cannot be underestimated. Once Feyre becomes Fae and is near the wall, she realizes why fairies are deterred from it. They can feel the wall when they go through it, and it's like the wall angrily lunges for the Fae to stop them from slipping past. Its power flares and it will try to close the gap, but it just can't. But hey, let's talk about those holes, because even a strong barrier such as the wall has a few weaknesses. Over these past 500 years, small holes have appeared here and there in the wall, apparently because something extra powerful went through it and was able to break that barrier there. We only get a very small nod to this. I want to know more. But anyway, again, you can't see the holes in the invisible wall, but as a Fae, you can feel it as if the air is being sucked from one spot. While small, these holes are big enough for creatures to sometimes slip through to wreak havoc on nearby mortal villages, especially during Amaranth's reign when she gave these monstrous creatures the freedom to do so. These small rifts are also how fairies or mortals, like Tamlin and his wolf-disguised sentries and the Children of the Blessed, go between the mortal realm and magical world. So no, the wall cannot stop people from either side literally slipping through the cracks, but it does still do its job of dividing the lands and their peoples. Indeed, as we learn from early chapters of ACOWAR, there are very few first-hand accounts of Prythian from mortals, because anyone who does go over does not come back, contributing more to the mystery and danger of Prythian for these humans. There are 3 holes along the Spring Court border, and one of these holes is described as, quote, mossy stones placed across from each other, a faint whorl carved into them both, a gate. These 3 holes in the wall are about 2 days travel from one to the next, and there is another tear in the Magic's wall about half a mile offshore from the Spring Court. Remember that this is how the Inner Circle flies to the mortal realm back last book. We only know of one way to destroy the wall, which would of course remove the barrier that separates the Fae and mortals and allow Hybern to invade, take back the mortal lands, and re-enslave the humans. And that way is the Cauldron. Only the Cauldron is powerful enough to shatter the wall, but it requires the full might of the Cauldron. Or, since Nesta stole power from the Cauldron and is now not in tip-top shape, Hybern needs to help the Cauldron with complex spell work to exploit the existing holes in the wall to break it entirely. So the Inner Circle is now focused on fixing the holes in the wall using Nesta's magic that was directly forged from the Cauldron and is theoretically capable of fixing these holes. If the holes are repaired, then the Cauldron is not powerful enough anymore to leverage these holes and destroy the wall. And that, friends, is our Suriel Teatime on the wall.
Let us close out this section of the episode with our Fae-vorite moments. We get so many mentions of Feyre just casually using her powers in the masterful, controlled manner that she now has. In a book where we don't really get her powers in that flashy way, like how she took down the Adder last book, etc., I do love these little moments where she uses them in such an elite and powerful way to show how masterful she is. Feyre thinks about keeping Rhys's court, my court, safe. safe. I love lines like this where it shows that she's still adjusting to this new title of High Lady.
Feyre wonders if Tamlin knows whether she defended Valaris and slaughtered the Adder. I love that she's genuinely curious if this achievement reached Tamlin. It's kind of like she wants it to reach him so he can know how powerful she is and how she can defend herself and her own. Like, it's very much like, you know, like when you're being really successful and then you just kind of really hope that your ex hears about it so you can just rub it in their face. But also, I gotta add, like, I don't think that Tamlin has heard about this.
When Feyre is going into the woods, she is wearing Lucien's jeweled knife and belt that he gifted her right before she went after the Suriel in book 1. In a section where Lucien and Feyre's friendship really does go through some high highs and some lows. I just love that she's wearing his belt here and like really showing that they have that connection. While we're talking about Lucien, I love at the beginning of the summer solstice ceremony, Lucien's half asleep. He does not give a flying fuck about this ceremony.
I love how Feyre basically gives herself a crown for summer solstice. Her hair is braided above her head like a crown of white hawthorn blossoms upon it. Plant watch, everybody! Hawthorn blossoms mean love and protection and represent spring turning summer. Plus, it's said that fairies live under hawthorn trees and are the flower's guardians. I just love that so much. But back to the crown. Tamlin doesn't give Feyre a real crown like Rhys always does. So, hey, girl's gotta create her own crown.
I almost take back everything bad I said about Feyre in this episode for that reason alone. Like, that is such a queen move. I love that shit. We do get so little Rhys in this section, but I love that even through the jokey attitude, he is still being sweet, and their friendship is so rooted on these pages, despite being so far away. And he like says he wishes he could spend the day with her. Like, it's really sweet. And just like, man, it makes me think of long distance relationships. And I'm just like, oh, like where you're both super busy and you can't really talk or text that much.
All right, friends, this means that we are about to enter our Maasverse Madness, which today includes spoilers for the Crescent City series. If you have not read Crescent City, this is where we do part ways. But before you go, reminder that next episode we will be covering ACOWAR chapters 9 through 14. And like we said at the top of the episode, if you want to join the Patreon party, please do so. Patreon.com/Fantasy Fangirls.
We also have some new summer merch. We got tank tops. We've got koozies that make me so happy. We also added some kids merch as well, including I Am the Little Listening Ears shirt.
I need to still get those for my kids.
Well,
oh my gosh.
We've gotten some photos in the Discord of people having their kids wearing it. It makes me so happy. So you can check that out at fantasyfangirls.com. We also have our ACOWAR playlist, and that you can find the link in the show notes.
And if you didn't know any of what we're saying right now, that means you're not following us on TikTok or Instagram. So be sure to give us a follow at Fantasy Fangirls Pod.
And do not forget to rate and review the podcast. It is one of the best things that you can do for any podcast that you listen to. And it takes 2 seconds, and it's like giving us a big hug from afar.
All right, we are now officially entering our Maasverse Madness segment of the episode where we call out series crossover references and discuss theories. Today, we are discussing concepts that give spoilers for all 3 Crescent City books, so please only continue listening if you've read that series.
Feyre describes humans in this stretch as, quote, laced with earth and marrow and rot, mortality. Tell us how you really feel, Feyre. You cannot help but think about this as a little nudge to Earth and Blood, aka one of the houses in Crescent City, and it's also the house that humans reside in. Not to mention, this is not the first mention of Earth and Blood when it comes to humans. From ACOWAR, book 1, when Feyre is back in the human realm, she describes the human servants as, quote, unfinished, graceless creatures, Jesus, of Earth and Blood. There it is.
Well, she was even a human back then, too.
What a jackass. And then during the summer solstice, here we go. Feyre does her little glowing trick. And again, it's described as starlight. SJM is just fucking with me at this point, I swear to God. In case you do not know what I'm talking about, back in our coverage of ACOMAF, I mentioned how I do not think these glowy powers of Feyre's are from the Day Court, or at least not entirely from the Day Court, but instead they are from Rhys, who is a starborn Fae descendant. From the Selene download in A House of Flame and Shadow, she had a son with the High Lord of the Night Court, which was her mate, and she bound her son to the Dusk Court prison. Quote, no one knew that infant who sometimes glowed with starlight had inherited it from me, that it was the light of the evening star, the Dusk Star. So she technically has powers from all 8 courts, we should say, because technically this is a Dusk Court power. Several times in ACOWAR chapter 55, Feyre thinks about her glowing quote, "I think the light pouring out of me might have been starlight." And here in this chapter stretch, we get another instance of her calling it starlight. Super powerful starborn curse breaker Feyre Archeron. And then we have Nesta, who had the 8-pointed star tattooed on her back from her bargain with Cassian, where it's like, who knows what she's about to go off to, but then her sister has the powers of the descent. Like,
what if Feyre uses that power, kind of like how people use it for Bryce to, like, you know, charge her up, and Feyre has that ability to do that for her sister. Wait. But Nesta doesn't have that tattoo anymore.
No, it went away when she and Cassian.
That's right. I thought I was onto something there.
So good.
All right. Well, there we have it. We just did our very first ACOWAR episode 1. I'm so excited. There are going to be 11 episodes total as we cover ACOWAR. Definitely do be mindful that we are going to be having kind of longer chapter stretches because it's just a longer book, but we got to keep it short so we can finish this up before the end of the year. All right. And next episode, like we said, we are covering chapters 9 through 14 of ACOWAR. We're going on a trip, everybody. We're going to the Autumn Court. We're going to the Winter Court. I'm so excited.
In the ACOWAR playlist during this chapter stretch, I have "When I Wake Up, Well, I Know I'm Gonna Be. I'm Gonna Be." And it's like, I will walk 500
miles. Oh, I love it.
It was really fun to create. Thank you, as always, to our executive producer, Hayden, aka our sanity manager. We truly don't know what we would do without you. We'd be insane, that's for sure. And friends, as always, please be sure to take a moment and share this episode with your fellow ACOTAR friends. If you have someone who's like, ACOWAR is my favorite book of the series, oh my God, I love it so much, here's the deep dive episode to send to them so that you too can question how much you like Feyre in this stretch.
All right. Thank you, everyone, so much. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Which, she only went to the Night Court twice. Why did she have 3 sets?
I don't know. I would have to go back and look.
I would as well. We didn't get that far in the outline.
It goes back to how he is a half-assed person, because in the words of Yoda, do or do not. There is no try. I am so bad at that, but I was a terrible person. Let me try that again. The wall is made of mostly ice and stretches for 300 miles across the border of Westeros, and it stands as tall as 700 feet. Now, the wall is manned by the Night Watch, who guard the realms of men. Over the centuries... What?
Try again.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Wrong wall.